A Court of Thorns and Roses. Chapter 1. The night the moon burned crimson. The first time I saw the moon bleed, I knew the gods had abandoned us. It happened on the eve of my 20th year in the village of Ilarin, a place so small that the stars seemed closer than the next town. We were nestled between the Valewood forest and the river Mirren, where mist curled like pale fingers around our homes, and the air always smelled faintly of iron. My father used to say it was the scent of the earth itself breathing, but I knew better. It was the scent of magic old, dying, and hungry. The elders warned us never to speak of the old days, never to whisper the names of the courts that ruled before the sundering. But on the night the moon burned crimson, silence could not save us. I was in the fields when it began, my hands buried in frost-bitten soil. The winter crops had failed again, and the ground had turned to stone. My little sister Lyra sat by the fence humming a song that no one taught her. The melody was eerie and low, as if it came from the roots of the forest itself. "Stop that," I murmured, brushing dirt from my palms. "You'll call them." "Call who?" Her blue eyes lifted to mine, bright, curious, and far too fearless. "The shadows," I whispered. "The ones who listen when the moon turns red." She giggled. "That's just an old tale, Elara." But when I looked up, the laughter caught in my throat. The moon, pale moments before now, pulsed like a wound in the sky, bleeding rivers of crimson light through the clouds. The air grew thick, heavy with the taste of copper, and from the direction of the forest came a sound I had never heard before, a whisper, deep and broken, echoing like 1,000 voices speaking as one. "Elara!" Lyra's scream tore through the dark. The fields shuddered. Birds exploded from the trees, wings slicing the air. The earth beneath my feet trembled alive. Then the mist began to move, not drift. Move, like something unseen was crawling through it, weaving between the stalks of frozen wheat. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand. But she was staring at the fog, eyes wide, body frozen. "Elara," she whispered. "They're calling my name." A shadow reached out from the mist. Long, thin fingers, black as smoke, brushed her cheek. "Lyra!" I screamed, pulling her away. But the fog surged forward like a living wave and swallowed her whole. The world tilted. My lungs filled with frost. I ran into the mist after her, blind, desperate, my voice cracking as I called her name. But the deeper I went, the colder it became. My skin burned with ice. My heartbeat echoed too loudly, like drums in a tomb. And then I saw them. Figures tall, luminous, with eyes like molten gold drifting between the trees. Their faces were perfect and terrible, carved from beauty and sorrow. They wore crowns of bone and shadow, and the air shimmered around them. Fae. The word itself was forbidden in Ilarin. The Fae were myths, monsters from the old world, who once ruled over mortals with cruelty disguised as grace. The sundering had banished them, or so the priests claimed. Yet here they stood, radiant and real, their presence twisting the air. At their center stood a man, or something that wore the shape of one. His hair was as black as the void, his armor glinting like obsidian kissed by fire. When he looked at me, the mist around us bowed. The High Lord of the Night Court. I didn't need to be told I knew. Every story, every whisper of him lived in the marrow of my bones. He tilted his head slightly. "You should not be here, mortal." My knees nearly gave way. His voice was deep, resonant like thunder rolling through the hollows of the world. "My sister," I managed to choke out. "The mist, it took her." He studied me. eyes burning with something unreadable. The mist takes what it's owed. What does that mean? I demanded, though my voice trembled. Give her back. He's far. A faint smile touched his lips. Do you command me, little human? I should have been afraid. I should have bowed. But rage burned hotter than fear. If you have her, I'll tear this forest apart to find her. His gaze sharpened, dangerous. The air thickened. I could feel the weight of his power pressing down on me, cold and ancient. But then, unexpectedly, he stepped closer. The scent of smoke and night filled my lungs. You remind me of someone, he murmured, a flame that refused to die. Then remember me well, I said, my heart pounding, because I will not die until I find her. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, maybe curiosity. Then he lifted his hand. The mist parted, revealing a faint glow in the distance. A figure, small, fragile, lying motionless in the snow. Lyra! I broke into a run, but before I could reach her, the High Lord's hand closed around my wrist. She lives, he said softly, for now. But the forest has marked her. You cannot stay here. I glared at him, breath ragged. Then help me save her. A silence stretched between us, long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat echoing. Then he released me, his touch leaving a trail of frost on my skin. There is a price, he said. There is always a price. What kind of price? He looked toward the bleeding moon. A bond. I didn't understand. A bond? He nodded once. Blood for blood, shadow for shadow. If you wish your sister to live, you will come with me. To where? To my court. His lips curved slightly. To the night itself. The world seemed to tilt again. Every instinct screamed to run, to flee back to the safety of the mortal lands. But Lyra's still body glowed faintly in the snow, her breath shallow, as if fading with every second. What happens if I refuse? Then the mark consumes her, he said simply, and the mist will take her soul. I looked at Lyra, at her pale face, her small hand twitching as if in pain, and I knew I had no choice. Then take me. The High Lord stepped forward until the world narrowed to his gaze. He lifted one gloved hand and drew a line down his palm with a silver blade. Black blood welled thick, glittering like ink. He offered it to me. Swear it, he said. By blood and by will. My hands shook. The metallic scent filled my nose, strange and intoxicating. I drew a sharp breath and whispered, I swear. He pressed his palm to mine. The instant our blood mingled, the world ignited. Shadows coiled around my arm, crawling under my skin. Pain lanced through me sharp, electric as if 1,000 stars were burning inside my veins. I screamed, falling to my knees. The High Lord's voice echoed in my head, smooth and dark. You belong to me now, Elara of Elarin. When the pain subsided, I lifted my eyes and saw the world anew. The forest was alive with light. Every leaf shimmered, every shadow breathed, and in the distance the crimson moon pulsed brighter, as if feeding on the bond between us. What did you do to me? I gasped. He smiled faintly. I saved her and cursed you. Before I could speak, the ground beneath us opened in a burst of shadow. Wind howled, carrying whispers that weren't quite words. I clutched my chest, my vision fracturing into shards of black and silver. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was his face, beautiful, cold, and unreadable, as he whispered, Welcome to the night court. He is Dasaw. When I awoke, I was no longer in the forest. I was in a palace carved from obsidian and moonlight, where the stars themselves seemed trapped within the walls. The air hummed with magic. My heart still burned from the bond, a chain invisible yet unbreakable. And deep within me, something had changed. Something ancient had awakened. The mortal girl I had been in Ilaran was gone, and the creature I had become had just opened her eyes. Chapter 2. The Palace of Shadows. The first thing I felt was silence, not the kind that lingers in empty rooms or follows a prayer. This was a silence that breathed, coiled, and listened. It pressed against my skin, humming like a living thing. I opened my eyes to a ceiling of black glass. Stars shimmered within it, not painted, not carved, real stars, trapped beneath the surface, moving slowly as if caught in an eternal night. My body ached, but the air felt softer than silk. When I sat up, I realized I was lying on a bed made of midnight blue velvet, surrounded by curtains that glowed faintly like embers dying in the dark. The floor was marble streaked with veins of silver, and across from me stood a tall window, showing an endless sky full of constellations I didn't recognize. I wasn't in the mortal world anymore. I was inside the night court. The bond pulsed faintly beneath my skin, a phantom heartbeat that wasn't entirely mine. When I touched my wrist, the mark shimmered, a thin crescent of black ink curling like smoke beneath the flesh. I could feel him through it faintly, distantly, as if his heartbeat echoed beneath mine. A door opened. I flinched. A woman stepped in, tall and pale, her hair silver as moonlight, eyes sharp as blades. She wore a gown of dark silk that seemed to melt into the air around her. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice smooth but heavy with authority. "Where am I?" My throat was dry. "In the High Lord's palace," she replied, gliding closer. "You're lucky to be alive, mortal. The bond nearly killed you." I swallowed. "Who are you?" "Call me Saren," she said, stopping beside the bed. "I am the High Lord's seneschal. You will answer to me until he decides what to do with you." Her words made something cold crawl down my spine. "Where is he?" Saren's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Watching. Always watching." She motioned toward the door. "Get dressed. He expects you at dusk." When she left, I found a gown laid neatly across the foot of the bed, black silk, stitched with silver thread in the shape of constellations. It shimmered faintly when I touched it, adjusting to my size, clinging to my skin like shadow. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes glowed faintly, not blue anymore, but silver-flecked. My hair seemed darker, my skin touched with a faint luminescence that hadn't been there before. He did this. The thought echoed in my head like a curse. When the bells tolled, I followed the sound down a spiral staircase that seemed to twist forever, deeper and deeper into the heart of the palace. The air grew cooler, heavier with the scent of jasmine and smoke. At the bottom was a hall vast enough to swallow a cathedral. Columns of obsidian rose like trees, their surfaces rippling with faint reflections. A long table stretched down the center, set with crystal goblets and silver plates, though no one sat there, except him. The High Lord sat at the far end, draped in black and silver. His crown, or perhaps it was part of him, was a halo of faint shadow curling around his head. His eyes met mine as soon as I entered, and my steps faltered. There was no warmth in his gaze, but something else lingered there, recognition maybe, or guilt. "Ilara of Ilaran," he said, his voice smooth as smoke. "Welcome to my court." I forced myself to stand straighter. "You didn't give me much of a choice." "No one ever does," he said. "Not even the gods." I hesitated before asking, "My sister Lyra, is she safe?" "She breathes," he replied. Her soul no longer belongs to the mist. She will wake in time. Relief flooded through me so sharp it almost hurt. "Thank you," I whispered, despite the venom in my chest. "Do not thank me," he said. "The bond was your choice." I clenched my fists. "You didn't exactly give me another choice," he murmured, rising from his chair, "is rarely kind. Come closer." Every instinct screamed to run, but my feet obeyed him. He moved like the night itself, fluid, quiet, consuming. When he stopped before me, the air between us hummed with something alive. He studied me as if memorizing every breath. "You feel it, don't you?" he said softly. "The bond." I swallowed. "It burns. It binds," he corrected. "Our souls are tethered now. When you bleed, I bleed. When you dream, I will see." I took a step back, shaking my head. "You can't," he smiled faintly. "Oh, but I can." I felt the mark flare under my skin, heat pulsing from my wrist to my heart. For a moment, I could feel his heartbeat inside me, slow and steady, terrifyingly calm. I gasped, clutching my chest. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "You'll learn to control it," he said, "or it will consume you." "Why?" I demanded. "Why me? There must have been another way." "There wasn't." His gaze hardened. "The forest chose your sister. The only way to unmark her was through blood willing to bear the curse. Yours. Then free me," I said, desperate. "The bond is done. She lives." His eyes darkened. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" He turned away, his cloak whispering across the marble. "Because you carry more than my mark now. You carry the night itself." I froze. "What does that mean?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for Seren, who appeared soundlessly beside me. "Teach her the rules," he said, "and do not let her near the gates." "The gates?" I echoed, but the High Lord was already gone, dissolving into shadow as though he had never existed. The only thing that remained was his voice, echoing through the hall like wind through a graveyard. The night remembers its own. Seren led me through endless corridors, explaining as she walked. "The night court is divided into 7 halls," she said, "each ruled by one of the High Lord's shadows, his commanders, his keepers of law and power. You are bound to him and, by extension, to them. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not wander the lower halls." "And the gates?" I asked. Her expression tightened. "The gates lead to the void, the prison of the forsaken gods. No mortal should go near them." My skin prickled. "And if I do?" She looked at me, her silver eyes sharp. "Then you will wish the mist had taken you instead." We stopped before a tall set of doors carved with constellations. "This will be your room," Seren said. "The High Lord has ordered your training to begin tomorrow. Rest while you can." "Training?" I repeated. She smiled faintly. "You didn't think the night would bond with a human for nothing, did you?" When the doors closed behind her, I was alone again. I sank to the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. The faint glow under my skin pulsed in rhythm with something distant, his heartbeat, his power, his will. It terrified me how easily it called to mine. Outside the window, the night deepened. The stars pulsed brighter, as if whispering secrets to the dark. And somewhere, faintly, I heard his voice in my head. "You are part of the night now, Alara. There is no going back." I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound didn't fade. The bond throbbed alive, breathing, hungry, and in that moment I knew the truth. He hadn't just saved my sister, he had claimed me and whatever the night wanted, it wasn't mercy. Chapter 3. The Mark of the Night. Dawn never came in the night court. Here, the sky lingered forever in twilight, neither day nor dark, caught in an endless exhale between stars. When I woke, the air shimmered faintly, rippling like water. My pulse thrummed in my wrist, where the mark still burned softer now, but alive. I dressed in the same gown as before, though it seemed to have changed overnight. The constellations on the fabric moved, forming new shapes that flickered like eyes watching me. Saren was waiting outside my door. "You didn't sleep," she observed, her tone unreadable. "How can anyone sleep here?" I asked. She gave a thin smile. "You'll get used to it, or you won't." Without another word, she turned and led me down the hall. The palace was quieter than I remembered, though I could feel the hum of magic in the walls, a slow heartbeat, deep and steady. The marble floors reflected faint light, and the corridors twisted in impossible ways. Once, I could have sworn I saw a mirror that showed me turning away before I actually did. We stopped before a set of iron doors etched with runes that pulsed like living veins. Saren pressed her palm against the metal, and the runes dimmed. The doors swung open with a sound like a sigh. "Your training begins here?" she said. Inside was a circular chamber filled with mirrors, hundreds of them from floor to ceiling, each showing not my reflection, but memories I didn't remember, shadows of other lives, other faces. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The Mirror Hall," Saren said. "It reveals what you are and what you hide." I turned slowly. In one mirror, I saw myself in Ilaran younger, laughing with Lyra. In another, I saw my hands stained with blood. Then one flickered to show me standing before the High Lord, bound by fire. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because you are no longer mortal," she said. "The bond is changing you, and you must learn to master it before it consumes you. Every bond to a High Lord awakens a piece of his power. The night will test you, survive it, or be devoured by it. And if I fail," her silver eyes softened barely, "then you'll become one of them." "Them?" She pointed to the mirrors. I turned and saw shadows moving inside. They weren't reflections. They were alive, faceless figures made of smoke and sorrow, trapped behind glass. Their hands pressed against the surface, their mouths open in silent screams. "Those who failed," Saren said quietly. "Their souls feed the court." I stepped back, cold crawling up my spine. "This is madness." "This," she said, "is the night, for hours or maybe days." Time meant nothing there. She made me focus on the mark, to feel it, to summon it. "The bond is a conduit," she said. "The High Lord's power flows through it, but only if you let it. The night does not obey fear, but fear was all I had. Each time I tried to summon it, shadows burst from the ground, wild and feral. They wrapped around my arms like chains, whispering in voices that weren't my own. I could hear fragments, screams, laughter, pleas. I tried to push them away, but they clung tighter until Saren's blade cut through them and the whispers died. "You fight it like a mortal," she hissed. "Stop resisting." "I'm not like you," I shouted, my breath ragged. "I didn't choose this." "Then choose it now." Her eyes flashed silver. "Or the night will choose for you." The mirrors trembled. For a heartbeat, I saw my own reflection twist into something else, eyes black as pitch, hair like ink spilling through the air. A crown of shadow bloomed above my head, and then, for the first time, I heard him. "Let it in, Ilara." The High Lord's voice, in my mind, in my bones. I gasped. "Get out of my head. You bound yourself to me," he murmured, smooth and cold. "This is the price." My knees hit the floor as darkness surged through me, hot and electric. The mark burned, veins glowing faintly under my skin. I screamed and shadows erupted around me, spiraling upward in a violent storm. The mirrors shattered. When I opened my eyes again, I was kneeling in a pool of lightless water. The shards of glass floated around me like dying stars. Saren stood several feet away, blade in hand, eyes wide. You called it," she whispered. "What?" I rasped. She pointed behind me. I turned and froze. From the darkness rose a creature made of pure shadow, its body sleek and elegant, its eyes glowing faintly violet. It looked like a wolf, but its form shimmered, as if half spirit, half flame. It circled me once, then bowed its head. "It's bound to you," Saren said softly. "A familiar of the night. No mortal has summoned one in centuries." I reached out a trembling hand. The creature pressed its muzzle against my palm, cold as mist, yet pulsing with life. "What does this mean?" I whispered. "It means," said a voice behind me, "you are not as human as you believe." Edna, the High Lord, stepped from the darkness, his presence filling the room like thunder. Saren bowed low, her face pale. "My lord," she said. "Leave us," he commanded. She obeyed instantly, vanishing into shadow. When she was gone, he turned to me. His gaze lingered on the mark still glowing on my wrist. "You've awakened the bond faster than I expected." "I didn't mean to," I said. It never just happens." He circled me slowly, like a predator studying prey. "Tell me, Elara, do you know why the night chose you?" "I don't care," I snapped. "I didn't ask for any of this." He stopped behind me. "And yet, it burns in your veins. Tell me you don't feel it, the hunger, the power, the darkness whispering your name." I turned to face him. "If you think I'll serve you—" He moved before I could finish, too fast, too silent. One moment he was across the room. The next, his hand was under my chin, tilting my face up. His eyes gleamed like starlight caught in obsidian. "I don't need you to serve me," he said softly. "I need you to survive me." The air thickened. The mark on my wrist pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The shadows around us stirred like a tide. "Why?" I whispered. His voice dropped to a murmur. "Because the night remembers, and soon it will wake." And before I could ask what he meant, he pressed 2 fingers to my wrist. The bond flared bright and unbearable. I saw flashes, stars falling, blood on marble, a woman with my face crowned in flame. Then darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke again, I was in my chambers. The wolf shadow lay curled at my feet, breathing softly. The mark no longer hurt, but it glowed faintly alive. Outside, thunder rolled through the endless night, and in the distance I heard faint whispers rising from beneath the palace floor. The night was moving, and I was at its heart. Chapter 4. Whispers Beneath the Veil. The corridors of the night court had a voice of their own, not in words I could understand, but in murmurs, echoes, and sighs that threaded through the stone and shadow. Each step I took seemed to awaken something ancient, something patient and watchful. The palace was alive, and it knew I had come. Saren led me through twisting halls, past archways carved from obsidian and silver, past doors that pulsed faintly like veins. She moved like water, quiet and exact, never allowing me to speak, never letting me stray. The wolf shadow followed at my heels, silent, its violet eyes reflecting the faint light of the enchanted corridors. "You must learn quickly," Saren said, her voice a whisper that seemed to bounce off the walls. "The bond has awakened. The High Lord expects results. You will learn control, or the night itself will claim you." "What if I fail?" I asked, though my voice trembled. "Then you will become part of the court," she said simply. "A shadow among shadows." I swallowed, shivering. The thought made my stomach twist. I had been a mortal girl with a simple life, a village, a sister, a world without shadows and power. Now all of that was gone. My sister lived only because I had chosen the night, and that choice had chained me to a world I barely understood. We arrived at a large chamber, its floor a mosaic of silver and black depicting constellations I could not name. In the center was a pool of dark water, still and smooth like glass. I approached cautiously, peering into its depths. My reflection stared back, or did it? The eyes weren't mine. They glowed faintly violet, like the wolf shadows. My hair seemed longer, darker, moving as if stirred by a breeze I could not feel. My breath caught in my throat. "Do not fear," Saren said behind me. "The pool shows potential, what you can become, what you must become to survive the bond." I recoiled. "I don't want to become that." Her expression was unreadable. "You don't get a choice." "Not really. Power has a cost, and the night always collects it." The words lingered in the air like smoke. I sank to the floor beside the pool, my reflection shimmering. The bond pulsed faintly, warming my wrist. I could feel him, the High Lord, through it. Not just his presence, but his thoughts, his intentions. A thread of power connected us, invisible yet undeniable. "Survive," he whispered in my mind, "or be consumed." I closed my eyes, trying to separate my heartbeat from his, my will from the night. It was impossible. Every time I drew a breath, I felt him. Every flicker of shadow, every sigh of stone reminded me that he was there, that he had claimed me, that I belonged to this world now, whether I wanted to or not. The first lesson began that evening. Saren had me stand in the center of the pool chamber, the dark water lapping at my ankles. "The night speaks in shadows," she said. "To control the bond, you must listen. You must feel the darkness and not let it control you." I hated her instantly. "Close your eyes," she commanded. "Call the bond, let it flow through you." I did as she said, trembling, heart hammering in my chest. The mark on my wrist flared faintly. The shadows around the room stirred. The wolf shadow padded closer, pressing against my leg. "Now," Saren said, "let the night answer." The water at my feet began to ripple. Shadows rose from the pool, twisting and coiling like serpents of smoke. They wrapped around my ankles, crawling up my legs. I gasped, trying to step back, but the shadows held me, whispering in voices I could barely comprehend. Power, fire, hunger, blood. I felt my hands burn as the mark pulsed stronger. My mind filled with images, forests aflame, kings kneeling to shadows, women screaming under a sky of falling stars. The High Lord's voice cut through it all, calm, commanding, relentless. "Do not resist." I screamed, pounding my fists against the shadows, but the whispers grew louder. They knew my fears, my regrets, my longing for my sister. They threatened to drown me in despair, and yet, through the chaos, I felt the wolf shadow's presence steady, grounding, a tether to what little humanity remained. I clenched my teeth and focused. The shadows twisted, and I realized They weren't attacking me, they were testing me, pushing, prodding, probing the edges of my mind. Control it, I whispered to myself. Slowly, painstakingly, I let the bond flow through me. I didn't fight it. I didn't resist. Instead, I let the shadows wrap around me, felt their weight, and directed it with my will. The whispers quieted. The shadows sank into the water, leaving only ripples behind. Saren watched, expression inscrutable. "Well done," she said softly. Most mortals would have shattered. I sank to my knees, shaking, sweat running down my face. What am I?" I asked, voice trembling. "You are bound to the High Lord," she said. "And through the bond, you are becoming part of the night. You have potential, but potential comes with a cost. Every time you use the bond, every time you awaken the shadows, you give a piece of yourself to the court. Eventually, you may forget what it means to be mortal." I swallowed hard. "And my sister?" Saren's eyes softened. "She lives because of you. But her life is tied to yours now. Every step you take in the night, every choice you make, affects her." I shivered. I had thought the bond was about power. I had thought it was a curse for me alone, but it wasn't. It was a leash, a tether, a chain that bound not only me but the people I loved. That night, sleep did not come. I lay on the black velvet bed, the wolf shadow curled at my feet, and the moonlight, always red, always bleeding, cast its glow across the room. I traced the mark on my wrist with trembling fingers. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I could feel him there, watching, patient and relentless. "Do you understand the rules yet?" I clenched my fists. "I understand," I whispered, but I didn't. Not yet. The palace whispered around me. Shadows moved just beyond my sight, and beneath the walls, deep in the bowels of the court, I could hear something else faint, ancient, like the echo of 1,000 forgotten souls. The night was alive, and it had chosen me to awaken its deepest secret. Chapter 5. The Thorn and the Crown. The palace did not sleep, but it dreamed. I learned that on the third night after the bond began to settle, when the walls themselves breathed a cold breath and the constellations etched into the marble shifted into new alignments, somewhere a bell tolled, low and hollow as if rung underwater. The wolf shadow at my feet, who had begun to answer to the name Umbra, lifted its head and huffed a warning. I had not told anyone I named him. It felt like tempting fate to give shape to the thing that tethered me to the night. But he seemed to accept it, and in accepting it, I accepted that small, defiant piece of myself. A sliver of the endless dusk slid across the floor like a blade. The mark at my wrist warmed, not burning, not hurting, calling. I pressed my palm to the obsidian window and watched storms gather under a motionless sky. Lyra's laugh, bright and mortal and unafraid, rose like a memory and snagged on the thorns of my new world. "Enough," I whispered into the glass, and the palace heard me. A door opened in the wall that had not been there before. Umbra stood at once, violet eyes luminous. The hairs at the nape of my neck prickled. I should have summoned Saren, should have obeyed the rules, but the night had been teaching me a more essential law. Doors appear when truths are ready to be found, and sometimes rules existed to keep truths asleep. I crossed the threshold with Umbra at my heel. Beyond lay a narrow stair that spiraled downward, lit by candles that burned with pale blue flames. Dust rose at my steps. Between the stones, I could see a soft, steady glow like starlight pumping through veins. The scent of old vellum and cold metal met me at the bottom. A library, hidden, its shelves as tall as towers. Leaves of black iron framed the aisles. Chains ran from shelf to shelf like cobwebs made by a patient god. This is not for guests. The voice didn't startle me only because I had learned to expect the night to speak from every angle. I turned slowly and found a man standing in the mouth of a shadow. He was not beautiful the way the High Lord was beautiful, no cruel perfection, no bladed grace. He had a face scored with faint scars, hair clipped close to his head, eyes the color of old steel. He wore no crown, only a simple jacket of dark leather that moved like liquid when he shifted. Then I suppose I am not a guest, I said. He considered that answer, then dipped his chin. You're not. You're a problem our Lord bound to himself. Umbra's growl uncoiled, low and soft. The man raised both hands. Peace, he said. I'm not your enemy. Who are you? Thane, he replied, keeper of the Black Archive, sworn to the High Lord, sworn to the gates. His gaze traveled to my wrist, lingered. And you are the reason the constellations moved. I fought the urge to conceal the mark. I'm here for answers. You're here because the night wants something from you, he corrected mildly. It always does. He gestured down an aisle. Walk with me. I did not move. The seneschal said I was not to wander the lower halls. Haprit, Saren is rarely wrong, Thane said, but the night outranks us all. He started forward, not waiting for my consent. You won't find what you need in permitted rooms. Umbra nudged my hand, and I followed. We passed shelves where books hummed faintly, as if the script inside had never settled letters trying on shapes like gowns. In one alcove stood a glass case, and within it a crown of bone woven with silver thorns. My footsteps slowed. Thane noticed. The crown of Evernight, he said. It chooses rulers or devours pretenders. Does he wear it? I asked before I could stop myself. Does the High Lord wear it? No, Thane said. He refuses. His mouth twisted. Wise or arrogant depends on your prayers. You speak as if you are not sure. I'm a soldier, Thane said. I don't pray, but I do keep count. He tapped the glass lightly, and the crown shivered like an animal resisting a leash. This wants blood. He denies it. Every year the gates strain harder. The gates, I said softly. The prison of the forsaken gods. Thane's steel eyes returned to me. You've been told pieces. I'll give you a page. He steered us to a lectern where a book lay open, its pages black, its ink silver. We call them the Forsworn, though once they were simply God's daughter, mother, stranger, storm. When mortals and fae made bargains like songs, the gods moved freely. Then came the sundering. Not a war of armies, a war of promises. The night took the worst of it into itself, and the gates were forged in the wound. And the High Lord keeps them shut, I said. At the cost of what? His court? His people? At the cost of every bond the night demands, Thane said. We give shadows to hold back gods. I touched the lectern. The page before me showed a figure kneeling, the stars bending, a chain running from heaven into the black earth. The kneeling figure was crowned. The chain ran into his chest. I knew without knowing that this was the High Lord. What's his name? The question left me like a soft theft. Thane's mouth curved. We keep many names in the archive. The one you may say is Valen. The name settled into the bones of the palace, and the palace did not flinch. Valen, it tasted like frost and iron, and a promise that knew how to bleed. He bound me, I said, to save Lyra. Thane nodded. And because the night recognized you. Recognized me as what? Thane set his hand on the page and turned it. The next illustration was a woman, not drawn in the soft adoration of saints, but with the almost cruel care of someone who knows every flaw is a hinge. Her eyes were inked with silver, her hair wreathed in something too delicate to be a crown and too savage to be flowers. The caption below, written in a language I did not know and somehow understood, read, "She who answers, bride of the threshold." I stepped back. "No, not bride as in wedding," Thane said. "Eyes on me, bride as in bridge, the living throat of an oath. There is an old pattern. When the gates strain, the night chooses a mortal with a voice strong enough to be heard past god metal and star iron. Once in an age, the night chooses a singer who can carry two worlds across a single breath. Lyra's humming in the fields, the song no one taught her. The mist leaning toward the sound. My sister, I whispered. The night chose Lyra. Thane's gaze did not waver. It reached for her, but bonds are not snares. They are bargains. You spoke first. You put blood to blood. The night honored that. It took you. It should have relieved me. It didn't. Because if the night had wanted a singer, and it had found me instead, what happens, I asked, when the night chooses wrong? Thane exhaled, and his breath wreathed a little in the cold. It doesn't choose wrong, it chooses differently. And then the price moves. I grasped the lectern to steady my hands. Tell me the price. Your life if mismanaged, Thane said simply. Your soul if squandered, the High Lord's sanity if refused, the court's survival if you fail. And Lyra? The mark in the mist was not erased, he said. It was diverted. The song inside your sister is still hers. When it ripens, others will hear it. Others? Thane's mouth thinned. The day court has priests who keep old calendars. The dusk court has collectors who believe songs can be bottled and sold. There are mortal kings who would burn a village to salt if the ash glowed gold. And there is, he hesitated, there is a woman who believes the night should sleep forever. Her knives are elegant. Her titles are many. Name her. We call her the Quiet Queen, Thane said. Though she hasn't worn a crown in centuries, she has worn crowns, worn them out, one by one. I felt the bond stir in invisible flecks, as if Valen's attention had tilted toward our conversation. I looked up into the rows of books that breathed like living lungs. Why tell me this? Because when the Quiet Queen moves, it will not be to take you, Thane said. It will be to take the girl you bled for. The night will hold you. It cannot hold her. And because, he added more softly, I liked your refusal to kneel, the admission disarmed me more than any threat. Then help me. Teach me something I can use now. Thane studied me, as if weighing my request on scales only he could see. Then he shut the book. The lights shuddered, steadied. There is a lesson the seneschal will not teach you. She was made for rules. I was made for war. If you are a bridge, you must learn the weight of crossing. Follow me. He took me to a small, round room whose ceiling was a disk of translucent stone. Through it, the endless night looked like a heart mid-beat. In the center stood a shallow bowl etched with sigils that seemed to breathe. Around it lay talons of glass, feathers of hammered moon metal, teeth of something large and serpent fierce. What is this? A chorus, Thane said. The night does not answer words. It answers pressure. You will learn to press. Slow, precise. He held my gaze. Do not ask the bond to blunt the world for you. Ask it to tune. He showed me how to set my palm to the bowl without letting my fear bleed into it, how to breathe until the air inside the circle belonged to me, how to let Umbra's steady presence climb my veins like a vine, how to feel for the thread that was Valen without tugging on it, merely noting it, as one notes the tide while learning to swim. Again, Thane said every time I faltered. Again. His voice made a metronome of patience. After an hour or a lifetime, the bowl began to hum against my skin. The sigils brightened, dimmed, brightened. They found my rhythm, or I found theirs. And when the two rhythms touched, something clicked. The ceiling darkened, then cleared. The stars rearranged the way birds change formation. The air fell quiet, the deep kind of quiet that doesn't mean nothing is there, but that everything is listening. I had not called Valen, but I felt him glance toward me like a hand pausing over a quench water barrel. He did not intrude. It felt like a gift and an accusation. Good, Thane said, not unkind. Now, the weight. He placed one of the glass talons in my free hand. Press, he said. I pressed. The bowl's hum rose, and with it came a view. Not a picture exactly, not a memory, an angle, as if the world had moved 1 inch to the left, and in that inch was a truth I had never seen. Ilaran, my village, winter brittle fences, the fields I had bled in, and at the river the shallows where Lyra and I had dared summers dare a man in traveling gray spoke to my father. My father's hands were empty, so empty the emptiness became a shape. The travelers were not. He held a small caged thing that glowed the color of Lyra's humming made visible. I gasped, and the bowl sang higher as my breath snagged. Do not break the angle, Thane said. Do not judge it yet. See, my father reached for the cage. The traveler set it back. My father's mouth shaped a word I could not hear, would not need to hear. I knew the word. Price. The view shivered and collapsed like a tent whose rope had been cut. The hum wobbled. My palm burned. Again, Thane said. Who was he? My voice was barely human, scraped raw. Who what sold my sister's song? Thane was very still. The angle does not name. It shows. You may seek names later. What if later is too late? His jaw flexed once. Then the names you learn will be epitaphs. I almost threw the talon at him. Umbra pressed against my hip, heavier than a shadow should be. I swallowed the shard heat in my chest and set my palm again. Again, I said. The bowl hummed. The angle opened elsewhere. The dusk court. A hall of veils and mirrors. A woman with a smile like a knife's reflection tasting sugar, whispering to a courier. The courier's satchel bore the sigil of a white, unblinking eye. He held a paper painted with staves and notes, and a little girl's humming caught in a map. The angle held long enough for me to see the destination marked, River Mirren, written in a hand that tried to be elegant and failed. Because eagerness ruins elegance, the angle broke. The room returned. Dusk has heard, Thane said. It moves quickly when profit glitters. How long until they arrive? Difficult to say, Thane said. There are paths that fold and couriers who don't sleep. But if you can see it this clearly, it is not days. Then I'm going to Ilaran, I said. Now, Thane's gaze flicked to my wrist. You're bound to a place as much as a man. The night will not enjoy being left. Let it sulk, I snapped. Valen does not sulk, Thane said. And for the first time, he smiled with his teeth. He hunts, then he can hunt me, I said, and tasted madness in the bravado. Or he can hunt with me. Thane stepped closer, low voice firm. Listen to me, Bridge. You have opened an angle. That is no small thing. You press well. But outside these walls, there are angles other hands may press against you. You will need a seal. He turned and moved to a niche where a small chest lay sleeping under dust. From it, he drew a ring forged of 2 bands, one black, one silver twined but not touching. Between them hovered a thread of darkness so thin it might have been drawn with a single hair. He held it out. Place it to your mark. I did. The ring slid onto my middle finger and tightened, then loosened until it was simply itself. The mark on my wrist cooled. The bond did not diminish. It focused. The line to Valen steadied like a rope thrown over a cleat. What is it? I asked. A void catcher, Thane said. It will keep other hands from trying to rewrite your angle while you walk it. It will not stop a blade. His eyes dipped to Umbra. He might. Umbra licked the air and just for a heartbeat looked like something not wolf at all. Something older, with 9 shadows where one should be. Will Saren stop me? I asked. She will try, Thane said. She loves the High Lord with rules. You love him with ruin. Both are useful. Your road is simply louder. I did not reply. I looked once at the crown of Evernight in its glass coffin, at the way the thorn circlet seemed to lean toward me as if recognizing a throat. And then I left the archive. The stair felt longer on the way up. I moved quickly, Umbra's pause silent, my mind a tight braid of fear and purpose. At my door I found Saren waiting, as if the palace had placed her there like a weight on a lid. You've been below, she said. She did not phrase it as a question. Yes? The High Lord told you not to. The High Lord bound me, I said. This is me binding back. Her gaze flickered to the ring. I braced for reprimand. Instead, she sighed an old, tired sound that made her look for once less like a blade and more like a woman who remembers splinters. Then go, she said softly. I blinked. You're not going to stop me? I could put 100 laws between you and a door, Saren murmured, and the night would write 101 keys in your pocket, and Thane has already prepared you, so quarreling with you would only waste what little time you have. Dusk is coming for Lyra, I said. I felt the archive turn its head, she replied. I assumed it looked for yours. I'll bring her here, I said. Where the night can't, where the night won't. The night can take anything, Saren said, and her eyes, for a flash, showed a loneliness that had lived a long time with itself, but it does not always choose to. Bring the girl. We will try to be kind. Try, I echoed, hating the hinge of the word. She is not bound, Saren said. Kindness is cheaper than chains. How do I leave? I asked. He forbade the gates. I am not sending you to the gates, she said. I'm sending you to the between. Press the ring to your mark and ask for the place your bones learned before you had a name. My bones? I repeated, baffled. Ilaran, Saren said, as if answering both a question and a grief. Say it. I pressed the ring to my wrist. The void catcher cooled, then warmed, then flashed once with darkness so pure it had edges. I closed my eyes and said, Ilaran. The floor thinned under my feet, not fell thinned, like milk to water. Umbra pressed against my hip. Saren's hand caught my forearm and squeezed once the first human thing she had ever done to me. Elara, she said. I opened my eyes. Do not bargain with men who keep their souls in cages, she said. They look like priests, and they sound like fathers, and they sing like brothers. They are not. I won't, I lied. She smiled, small and disastrous. All bridges lie, the world narrowed to a bright black thread. Then the palace vanished. And is so all you a. We did not fly. We slid. The between felt like the underside of a pond in winter, cold, heavy, clear. The stars above were knife points, unblinking. Somewhere the bond thrummed, but distant, as if an ocean separated me from the shore of Valen's attention. He knew I had gone. He did not drag me back. Which was permission or test or both. The between spilled us into a stand of birches at the edge of the Mirren. Elarin's roofs hunched against the sky, their thatch winter stiff, their chimneys coughing. Smoke and soup and iron and everything I had been before seeped into me, familiar and cruel. Umbra's fur stood along his spine. His ears cut the air. There were footprints in the snow where no feet had the right to be. Too shallow for mortal, too clean for fey, as if the snow had been placed around them, not pressed by them. Dusk, I breathed. Umbra's muzzle angled left. We moved along the river, silent as consequence. We passed the willow where I had whispered secrets to the wet bark, the rock where Lyra had counted dragonflies, the path where, once, a boy had tried to hold my hand and I had said no because I was afraid of belonging to anything. A soft, deliberate cough. We flattened behind a fallen oak. Through a screen of winter branches, I saw 3 figures in gray beneath my father's eaves. One held a lantern that did not shed light so much as erase darkness. Another leaned on a cane that looked like music sheet rolled into bone. The third, small, hooded, stood with her face lifted as if memorizing the window with her eyes closed. The courier's satchel bore the white, unblinking eye. The door opened. My father. He looked older in 3 nights. Or perhaps I was older in 3 nights and could see it now. He did not smile. He did not bow. He did not invite them in. He stepped into the snow and closed the door behind him. "This is my house," he said. The man with the lantern smiled in the way one smiles at a puzzle one is about to solve. "We have music to return," he said. His voice was friendly. It was not kind. "The river took something that belongs to us." "The river takes what it's owed," my father replied, and a shard of my life cut me open because I had heard those words in another mouth, in another wood, and the echo lined up too neatly. The lantern man tilted his head. "Then perhaps it owes us your girl." "She's not a debt," my father said. "She's a child." The courier with the unblinking eye spoke. "Children sing." He lifted the satchel. "We wrote it down for you, so you could see what we mean." He drew out a page. Even from the trees I felt the prickle of that stolen map. Umbra's growl fissured the air. The hooded figure turned her head toward our thicket. She did not reveal her face. She took 1 step, then another, and the snow made no sound under her boots. She stopped 3 paces from our hiding place and, without looking, said, "You have a shadow, Bridge." The word entered me like a nail. Bridge, Thane's word. Her voice was young and old and lightly amused. I rose. I did not feel my legs move. I rose because to crouch would have been to accept the angle they had given me. "Return the page," I said. The hood tilted. "It's a copy," she said. "The silver one stays with the scribe." She gestured toward the courier's satchel. "This is only paper." "Then burn it," I said, "and leave." The lantern man laughed. "You are the one the night took instead. How fortunate. It saves us the inconvenience of 2 errands." My father's head snapped toward me. His eyes opened the way, gates open, too suddenly, making every hinge scream. "Ilara," he said. He made my name a prayer, a warning, a home. Go back inside. In a moment, I said, and did not look at him because, if I did, I would be the daughter and not the bridge. The hooded girl cocked her head. You are young, she said. You think all trades are swords. They can be songs. Come with us. We will teach you how to stand in a room without dragging night behind you like a chain. We will keep the girl safe from the hunger that wears your lord's face. I took a step forward. The ring warmed, the bond hummed, not loud, but present, like a heartbeat against a door you had leaned your ear to. Say her name, I said. Say my sister's name. The girl sighed. Names are intimacy, she said lightly. We are not intimate and fray. I moved then, not fast, not slow. The way rivers move when they have decided a bank is no longer where a bank belongs. Umbra flowed with me. The lantern man lifted his light. The darkness retreated around it like a curtain drawn back by an unseen hand. I felt the pull, how easy it would be to let my own shadow thin, to be pressed by their angle until I matched their picture. I pressed back, not with rage, with tune. Thane's lesson found my blood. The ring steadied the pressure. I did not ask the night to save me. I asked it to sing truer. The lantern shuddered. Its light flickered, and for a heartbeat revealed the face beneath the hood. A plain face, the kind that disappears in crowds and is remembered by the nervous system, not the mind. Her eyes widened. Not fear, interest. He taught you tuning, she murmured. Valen grows careless. Valen grows bored, I said. And when predators are bored, they teach their prey to run faster. Delicious, she said, a laugh behind her words. Truly, the courier flicked the page. Notes flew off it like birds and hung in the air between us, trembling, bright. The river leaned toward them, thirsty. Lyra's song caught and caged and now lured out to bait the field. Father, I said without looking, if I told you to go inside and bar the door, would you listen? No, he said. I did not hear his steps, but I knew his nearness. I will not shut my eyes while men bargain for my children. Then do not shut them, I said. Watch. I pressed. The notes trembled, then harumphed like offended swans and flew back into the page. The courier yelped as if stung. The hooded girl laughed again, real delight this time. Yes, she said. Yes, you will do beautifully. Leave, I said. Take your copy. Bury your silver, if you want to live until the snow rots. We've already been paid, the lantern man said, but we can take a bonus. His eyes slid to the door behind my father. A little song for the road. Umbra leapt. The lantern shattered. The darkness fell not on us but around us, protective, familiar. The courier staggered. The hooded girl drew a blade so thin it looked like the edge between today and tomorrow. I did not call Valen. I did not need to. The night moved with me. The snow did not crunch. The air did not cry. The world simply tilted into the angle I chose, and in that angle I was inevitable. The courier ran. The girl did not. Her blade kissed my sleeve, my skin stinging with a line of cold fire. I answered with the pressure Thane had given me and the ferocity Umbra lent, and when we clashed, the sound was not metal, it was a bell, the kind rung underwater, the kind that wakes the drowned. Her blade snapped. She stepped back, hood askew, breath fogging. Oh, bridge, she whispered, pleased and a little mournful. They'll eat you alive. Get in line, I said. The lantern man was already kneeling in the snow, hands lifted, a child caught stealing fruit. A misunderstanding, he babbled. "A commission, nothing more. We never harm what we deliver. We—" "Deliver?" I said. "To whom?" "Names are a luxury," the girl said, weary of him like a neighbor weary of a rooster. She touched 2 fingers to her mouth and then to her throat. "You have your warning, Elara of Ilaran. Dusk does not waste time on second warnings." She turned and walked into the trees. The courier scrambled after her, clutching the satchel. The lantern man hesitated too long, and Umbra showed him what hesitation buys in winter. We did not kill him. We did not have to. The night had already begun to forget his name. My father stood very still, nearly swallowed by the wound his doorway had become. His eyes crawled over my face, my wrist, the ring, Umbra, the broken lantern at our feet, the page whose ink was settling back onto its theft like a satisfied beast. "Elara," he said again, hoarse. "What are you?" I wanted to say yours. I wanted to say afraid. I wanted to say hungry. What I said was the only truth that did not break under my tongue. Bound, and had, he closed his eyes. When he opened them, they had made a decision. "Lyra is sleeping," he said. "She dreamed of red water and woke singing." "We have to go," I said. Now his jaw worked. "Your mother is buried on this land. My vows are here. Bring them," I said, "or leave them to watch the door like good ghosts." The words were too hard. I could not soften them. The angle would not hold softness. I took his arm. "If dusk could come, so can others. I can keep her safe there better than you can here." "And who keeps you safe there?" he asked, gently and without malice. "The man who bound you? The court that eats its dead in mirrors? And I will," I said, and it was a promise scraped out of bone. "I will keep me safe." He looked at Umbra, who flicked an ear as if embarrassed. "And the dog?" "Wolf," I said, and Umbra thumped his tail once, as if promotion had been granted. "Wolf," my father corrected himself gravely. "Then let the wolf see what he can carry." We moved quickly. Lyra slept curled around a rag doll that had survived more winters than we had. Her hair smelled of smoke and honey. I bent and put my ear to her mouth and felt the small, sure wind that meant alive. A song clung to the rafters in strands, invisible and warm. I did not touch them. If I touched them, I would weep, and I needed my eyes. We took little. You cannot take a field. You cannot take a sky. You can take wool and bread, and the knife your mother used to peel pears. My father took that. I took the doll. Lyra made a sleepy sound when I lifted her and tucked her under my cloak. Umbra bumped her foot with his muzzle, and she sighed and burrowed deeper. Outside, the cold bit like a tax collector who knows your ledger. The between was already listening for my voice. "Ilaran," I said, once more, to thank and to name and to sever. Then I pressed the ring to the mark, and the world thinned. The Amandadum and A-T. Amandadum some other. When the palace came back, it came with thunder. Not weather, not drums, Valen's anger. It arrived like a tide that had decided the shore was insolence and must be taught humility. The corridor darkened. The constellations in the ceiling reeled and then locked, like a jaw clenching. Saren waited where I had left her. She saw Lyra, saw my father, saw Umbra carry the weight of a village's ending on his back, and whatever she had prepared to say fell away. "Bring her," she said. Quickly, we moved as a unit, as if we had rehearsed it. In my chambers, Saren set a basin at the foot of the bed. filled it with water that was black until you touched it, and then remembered how to be clear. She anointed Lyra's temples with something that smelled like night-blooming flowers and old letters. Lyra breathed easier. My father's hands shook. He hid them by gripping the back of a chair so hard the chair wondered if it had chosen the wrong profession. And then Valen entered. He did not explode. He arrived. It is a worse thing. The shadows bowed. The walls quieted as if to listen to a verdict. His eyes found mine first, always first, and then they drifted to Lyra. And there, something in his face burned down from fury to a colder flame. "You left," he said. "I returned," I said. "You pressed angles you were not taught." "I learned," I said. He took a step forward. Umbra stood without noise. Valen's gaze flicked to him, then back to me. "Your audacity would be admirable if it weren't so." "Necessary," I said, before I could caution myself toward prudence. Dusk came to my door. Silence bled into a shape that fit the room exactly. Valen's jaw flexed once. "Saren!" Dusk reached the river, Saren said. "The archive confirms." Valen's attention returned to me. The bond pulsed, not a tug, a measure. He had asked a question with his body that he would not give to his mouth. "Where else did you go? Who else did you see? What pieces of me did you trade to buy the second where you stand and glare at me now?" "I brought her," I said, a hand on Lyra's hair. "If I erred, punish me where it counts. But I will not be lectured for keeping my sister breathing." "Punish," he repeated softly, as if tasting a word he might use later for other purposes. His eyes flickered to my father. "You are the man who taught her to set her jaw like that." My father stared at him, the way a farmer stares at a storm that has found his thatch and refuses to move along. "I taught her to carry the weight she chooses," he said, "not to be carried by the weight that chooses her." A stillness that did not belong to mortals unfurled from Valen like a cloak. He stepped to the bed. He looked down at Lyra, and in that look there was a shadow of a different man, a man who had perhaps once been permitted to want uncomplicated things. "She hums in her sleep," he said. "The melody is not mortal." "It is not yours," I said. He did not look at me. "No," he agreed. "It belongs to the world." Then he raised his head, and the night moved toward his mouth the way water moves toward gravity. "Dusk will not touch her," he said. And it was not promise, it was law. Day will not name her. The quiet queen will not line her knives with this song. This court does not lose what a bridge carries across. He turned his attention to me at last. "But you will not leave again without calling me by name." "We, oh Nasife," I should have bowed. I did not. "Then give me one I can use." His mouth edged toward a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You already hold it, Ilara." "Valen," I said, and the palace breathed. "Good," he said. The fury in the walls thinned to vigilance. The storm pulled back to the horizon where storms conspire. In its wake, exhaustion found my knees and insisted I let them bend. Valen looked at the ring on my hand. "Thane," he said, as if the name were a small, wry compliment to the inevitable. "He taught me to tune," I said. "He taught you to survive," Valen corrected. "I will teach you to rule." "I am no queen," I said. "No," Valen said, and there was that shadow again, that hunger wrapped in forbearance. "You are a bridge, and bridges decide which armies cross." He turned to go. "Valen," I said, and he paused as if the word tugged a leash I could not see. "The quiet queen," I said. "How do I break her knives?" He did not turn back. "You do not," he said. "You make her choose a different throat." When he was gone, the room remembered how to be mortal. Saren drew a blanket to Lyra's chin. My father sank to the chair he had been punishing and let the wood forgive his hands. I lay beside the girl I had traded my life to save. I tucked her doll under her arm. Umbra curled on the threshold like a door-turned animal. The night purred in the walls, and under my palm the mark beat like a second heart, steady and terrifying in mine. Outside, somewhere deep beneath the palace, I heard the faintest singing, iron on iron, promise on promise, gates humming in their sleep. The gates, Thane had said, strain harder every year. Now, they were listening, and on the other side of listening comes hunger. Chapter 6. The Lesson of Names. The night court's bells did not ring ours. They rang hunger's. On the 7th hunger after I brought Lyra through the between, the palace woke me with a draught that smelled of iron and winter roses. Umbra stirred from the threshold and padded to the bed. His violet eyes were patient, the way old trees are patient when storms speak loudly about small things. Lyra slept, brow smooth, lashes feathering the shadow-flecked pillow. Saren had woven a ward like soft frost around the bed. It glowed only when I looked away, as if the night preferred kindness when it wasn't being watched. My father had refused a room and taken a bench near the door, hands on his knees, spine straight. He had slept that way in drought years, listening for rain that did not come. Valen did not knock. Shadows unlatched the door, and it sighed open, as if relieved. He crossed the threshold with the silence of a tide. The room bowed without moving. "You will come," he said. "I am already coming," I answered, rising. The ring cooled against the mark. The bond thrummed like a thread being tuned. He glanced once at Lyra, once at my father, and the world remembered what restraint looked like. "Bring the wolf," he said. "Leave the rest." Saren appeared, as if conjured by the word leave. She set a hand on my father's shoulder, and something like respect, like apology, flickered in her gaze. "I will keep her breathing," she told him. "You will try," he said, because he understood prices and refused to promise what he could not purchase. Umbra pressed against my thigh as I crossed to Valen. The High Lord's cloak brushed my wrist. It felt like thaw at midnight, when the river's ice softens but does not break. "Where?" I asked. "To the Hall of Names," he said, "where rulers stop being stories and become law. Biam and Abia." The hall lay deeper than the mirror chamber and higher than the bell towers, which is to say, it sat at a point in the palace where directions behaved like suggestions. Its doors were carved from a single slab of starlit wood, extruded from a tree that had never grown in any world I knew. The carvings were not scenes, not saints. They were names, thousands, beaten into the wood until each curve held a memory of breath. When the doors opened, I felt them, not the people, the weight of being said. 7 figures waited within, spaced like pillars. Not fey, not mortal, not mere shadows. Valen's commanders, his night maid, the ones Saren had called keepers of law and power. They were the geometry that kept the palace standing inside its own dream. Valen's voice filled the room without growing louder. "Elara of Elarin," he said, "Bridge of the Night, you will meet what you are bound to command." The first stepped forward. Tall, angular, hair braided with lengths of dark wire that hummed faintly when he turned his head. His eyes were colorless, like ice remembering the sea. "I am Cade of Ravel," he said, "master of angles." His bow was a calculation that returned the minimum due. You tuned well for one alive yesterday. Flattery, I said dryly, to keep my fear from standing up and waving its arms. How generous. He smiled with one side of his mouth. Generosity is a day-court habit. I permit myself only interest. The second skin reflected the ceiling's constellations as if her body were lacquered with night. She wore a collar of pearl fragments and teeth too small to be human. Maria, archivist of breath, she said, voice low enough to be mistaken for a thought. I keep the records of saying, your sister has already added a page. My throat tightened. She is a child, not a page. Bees, pages grow into books, Maria said. Better that she be written by those who love her. The third had the build of a smith and the hands of a sculptor. Sparks blinked lazily in his hair like fireflies that preferred iron. Valk, forge keeper, he said. His eyes landed on my ring and nodded to Thane without saying the name. Void catcher suits your bone. Thane made it, I said. Thane listens. The making was mine. He lifted his palm and I felt the echo of a hammer strike something that resisted the idea of being struck. You will need a blade that doesn't think it is one. Useful, I said. I am fond of impossible shopping lists. He did. He laughed, and the sound knocked dust from rafters that had never known dust. The fourth was small, almost delicate, until she moved and left behind an after-image that showed the predator inside the petal. Ira of the quiet steps, she said, assassin. When law fails, I escort it to the door. Her gaze brushed Umbra and paused, interested, as if greeting a colleague. The fifth was not a person but a hollow suit of armor filled with ash and the smell of rain after slaughter. Warden of the gates, it spoke, voice like two millstones turning. I am not allowed to touch you yet. Comforting, I said uneasily. Not to you, the warden mused. To me. Hadad Sohan. The sixth wore a sailor's coat and no shoes. Salt clung to him, though the nearest sea was a rumor. Rowan of the black current, he said. I solve problems that float. He winked. If you fall into a story, yell, I'll fish you out, or drown with you out of politeness. And the seventh? I asked. Is the night itself, Valen said. The space beside me cooled. A shape taller than everyone, darker than all the corners, leaned down and whispered a secret in a language bones remember. I understood only that it found me familiar. Now, Valen said, and it might have been a command or a mercy. We begin. Hey, Arvel Bray. Mansa, when the Arvel, the lesson of names, was a loss before it was a skill. Valen led me to a dais, where a basin of black glass lay embedded in stone, shallow as a palm. Its surface held a breath that had forgotten how to leave. Runes older than the ones in the mirror hall, older than the ones on my mark, circled it like vultures that had decided to be useful. Names are doors, he said. Say them wrong and you open rooms you cannot afford to enter. And say them right? I asked. You open debts, he said simply. And then you must decide what to spend the payment on. He set his hand above the basin. There are 3 names a ruler must master. The given, which is a gift and therefore an insult. The earned, which is a blade and must be cleaned. And the true, which is a chain that becomes a crown when you learn where to place it. I thought of the crown of Evernight, shivering in its case. You refuse to wear yours. I refuse to let it mistake my throat for a perch, he replied. He regarded me. You will learn to make the bond choose you too. I looked at the ring, at the mark. You bound me. And you said yes, he said. Consent is a no sharpened to yes. Word games, I said. Law, he corrected. He gestured. Show me your given name. Ilara, I said, and the basin did not move. He waited. I inhaled, feeling the way the village had said it, the way Lyra had said it, on mornings when honey was all we could afford, the way my mother, dying slow and never naming it, had shaped it like a prayer she hoped someone stronger would hear. Ilara, I said again, and the glass shivered. The runes leaned. Valen inclined his head. Better. He set 2 fingers to my wrist. The bond warmed. Now say the name the night will offer you if you let it. It rose out of me like heat from a forge. I did not understand it until after I had said it. It was not a word any mouth should hold. The basin did not shiver. It breathed in. Umbra's hackles rose. The warden tilted its helm. She sings an old door, it observed. Valen's gaze darkened. She sings threshold. The word knifed the air. I tasted iron. My knees loosened and the basin tried to reach my hands, as if it could sharpen me for its purpose with a single touch. No, Valen said, not to me, to the world. You will not take without bargaining. The basin stilled. I exhaled and realized I had not breathed since I had let the night's syllable cross my teeth. What was that? I asked. Half a name, Maria said, voice distant, eyes bright. Dangerous, delightful. And my true name? I asked, ignoring delight like one ignores a cliff one is not ready to jump. How do I learn it? Hey. Valen's mouth edged toward a smile that was not kind and not unkind, a promise sharpened to usefulness. You will not. He stepped closer, and the bond's drumbeat plucked a string behind my ribs. You will earn it, and each time you use it, a piece of your universe will align or vanish. Vanishing sounds inconvenient. Alignment is worse, Cade murmured. It makes enemies of friends and inevitabilities of choices. Show me, I said, because fear was a tool when pointed at the right target. He lifted his hand. The basin blacked out, then mirrored the ceiling stars. They seemed ordinary for one blink, and then I saw that the constellations were wound into chains. With a thought, with a word, with a permission, those chains could be teeth. Speak mine, Valen said. I flinched. No, you will have to, he said, not unkind, someday, to leash me when I forget what leashes are for. Do not dress commands in mercy. They will wear them to the wrong feast. I swallowed. Then, speak mine. I already did, he said softly, when I took you from the forest. His gaze did not break. Mine. The basin drank the last of the light and left us with the sound of our own bones. Again, he said. We worked until the runes softened from heat and my voice frayed. The commanders came and went. Valk adjusted the void catcher when it bit my finger until blood slicked the band and the ring learned what was skin and what was vow. Ira placed a knife in my palm and taught me how to hold it so the blade felt included rather than tasked. Rowan told me, deadpan, 3 jokes about fishermen who married storms and did not end well. The warden stood and did nothing, and the doing of nothing taught me how absence weighs a room. Cade taught me how to lay a name on a line and pull gently until the truth at the end came out with its own consent. Maria watched me the way libraries watch children who might grow up to deserve them. Valen taught me restraint the way wolves teach pups distances, by stopping just before the cliff. When the last rune dimmed to a tolerated glow, Saren appeared with water that had listened to a lullaby and bread that crumbled like a memory. She set it beside me without chastisement. You did not stop her, Valen said, a question disguised as fact. Thane did not fashion the ring to polish its own belly, she replied, and the bridge was always going to cross. She will drown, he said. Then you will teach her to breathe, she said without flinching. He looked at Saren as a man looks at a compass that points at a star already swallowed by dusk. You still think I can teach anything but hunger. You taught me how to count, she said. Counting is not hunger. It is the ward against famine. Their oldness threaded the air. I pressed my lips to the cup and drank, and pretended warmth could be borrowed. Enough, Valen said at last. Not to them, to himself. He turned to me. One more lesson. I waited. The quiet queen, he said, was given 13 names and earned one. Do not seek the true. You will not like what it asks of you. What did it ask of you? I asked. To outlive the reasons I was made, he said. I said no, she said yes. And so she became quiet, I said. She became patient, he said. Quiet is what Mercy calls patience when it is late for supper. Umbra's ears pricked, then flattened. The air around us flexed, as if the palace had stretched in its sleep. Maria went still. Cade's smile, which had lived like a bruise on his mouth all morning, vanished. The archive stirs, Maria said. The gates lean, the warden said. Speak plain, I said. Too tired for velvet. Valen turned his head as if listening to a snowflake choose a branch. A message, he said at last. From dusk, or from something that wears dusk to dinner. Ira was already gone, a blurred silk shadow. Rowan rolled his shoulders, and the smell of brine rose like laughter that had cut its finger. Valk's hands flexed. Seren closed her eyes and stood a little taller, like a candle insisting on being a column. The doors groaned. A courier of veils stepped through, carrying nothing and somehow balancing an armful of attention. He knelt, which is to say he collapsed gracefully to remind us of our posture. For the High Lord, he breathed, and the bridge. He opened his mouth and released a moth. It was made of paper and ash, and the oil that collects on mirrors that see too much. It flew once around the basin, once around my head, and settled on Valen's extended index finger. He did not crush it. He held it until its wings folded to reveal ink the color of a bruise. He read. The bond gave me the shape of the words without their sound, and I understood enough to wish I hadn't. Well? I asked. He lifted his gaze to me. His eyes were not storms. They were winter sky, flat, endless, beautiful when you forgot it could kill. An invitation, he said. To what? My voice was steady because I had learned that fear prefers an empty chair. Awake, he said, for a thing that is not dead. The quiet queen wants to watch something bury itself. Cade exhaled, a laugh made of knives. She never could resist theater. Valk shook his head. Name? Valen's mouth hardened. A mortal village whose bridge was stolen, a river that will not choose a bank. Ilarin. My heart forgot its rhythm and then found it again. Harder, as if it had grown armor while I was not looking. She cannot touch it here, Saren said, too quickly. She will not touch it, Valen agreed. She will name it, and names are doors, I whispered. Doors, he said, and debts. I stepped closer to the basin. My reflection looked back with the wrong eyes. Umbra pressed his head against my thigh and found my bone with his warmth. What do we do? I asked. Valen did not delay. We will attend. A dozen arguments sprinted to my tongue. He saw them, catalogued them, accepted the cost of ignoring them. You will learn tonight, he said, the difference between love and possession. Possession, I said, wears crowns. Love, he said, opens cages, even when the cage keeps the world safe. His gaze did not waver. You will learn how to stand on a bridge and choose which army crosses. The moth stirred once, then turned to ash, and fell in a small, neat circle at his feet. Dress, he said. Choose a weapon that does not believe in itself. Bring nothing you cannot lose. Lyra, I said, throat raw. Will be warded, Saren said. By me, by the archive, by the law that says the night does not bargain away the lives it owns. She glanced at my father, who had appeared in the doorway as if drawn by the gravity of our words, and by a man who understands weather. My father's gaze met mine. He did not ask permission. He gave it. Go, he said, or you will hear the song from here, and it will not forgive you for hiding. I nodded. Umbra's tail swept once, twice. Valen offered his arm. It was an old gesture made new by the iron in it. I did not take it. I matched his stride. We left the Hall of Names without closing the doors, because some doors are not there to keep anything out. They are there so the palace can hear you choose. The corridors tasted of rain. The constellations in the ceiling turned their faces toward a point I could not see. The night licked its teeth, pleased and apprehensive. At the threshold to the between, Valen paused and looked down at my hand. When you speak my name tonight, he said, do it like a blade you're not sure you want to use. And when I speak my own? I asked. He smiled, the dangerous kindness of a full pocket in a hungry market. Do not speak it, he said. Let it sing. The floor thinned. Elarin waited on the other side, and with it, a wake for a thing that refused to die, and a queen who loved knives the way I loved my sister, enough to ruin the world politely. Umbra pressed closer. We fell into the dark that remembers. Chapter 7. The Wake That Would Not Die. The between opened like a pupil widening. Cold rushed up the spine of the world, and we stepped through, Valen and I, with Umbra trotting a half-step behind, as if he'd been born to pace a high lord. The dark had its own gravity here. It held us in a slow fall, swallowing distance until the birches of Elarin gathered around us again, their white bark gleaming like ribs. The village had dressed in winter for a funeral no one agreed to. Lanterns hung from eaves, black ribbon tied around their throats. A long table stood under the sky, covered not in bread and salt but in bowls of river water that showed every face as a stranger. People came and stood but did not crowd hunger-taught etiquette. Children clutched their mothers' skirts and watched us with the raw attention of colts measuring fences. At the river bend, where Lyra and I had dared the summer, they'd built a bier of willow and iron, not for a body, for a name. It lay on the bier in letters made of stalk and nail, Elarin, a village bold enough to say itself and terrified enough to ask permission after. Wind snuck through the letters and made them whisper, as if practicing prayers. They've been coached, Valen murmured. The sound carried far enough that crows in the field turned their heads. Dusk paints its invitations carefully. I won't let them rename what I bled for, I said. You can't stop naming, he said. You can only answer it. Movement at the far end of the path. The veils announced themselves long before the feet they hid did. A procession slid out of the trees. 36 figures in gray, each wearing a different season's shadow for a mask. Musicians carried instruments built of wire and bone. A priest wore a garment laced with mirrors. A thin woman, with hands like punctuation, walked in the center, and the air conceded her the better path, as if etiquette itself feared a misstep. The quiet queen did not wear a crown. She'd worn too many to indulge in hats. She did not look old, though she was. Age clung to her like a fragrance you paid to forget. Her eyes were ordinary, which is how gods hide. In faces you would not chase in a market. What betrayed her were the pauses. She paused the way cliffs pause. Privately, vertically, with entire weather systems considering their options. I did not bow. Valen did not bow. We nodded, which is a weapon when done correctly. She nodded back, which is a treaty when done correctly and a declaration when not. "High Lord," she said. Her voice had no accent. It had been sharpened by too many teachers to belong to any one nation. "Bridge." "Quiet, Queen," Valen said. "Not any more," she said mildly. "I'm matriarch for this play. I have paid the word's tithe." "Then I will call you so," he said. She smiled. It was neat and did not intend to be kind. "And I will call you Valen." The name landed like a coin on a table between gamblers. Valen's jaw did not move. The bond bent slightly, like a bow under a reasonable arrow. He let it. I wanted to place my hand between name and man and tell the world to mind itself. Instead, I let the ring cool the urge and remembered Saren's law. "Counting is the ward against famine. Why have you asked for a wake?" I said, before my fear could learn to be polite. "There is no corpse. There is grief," the matriarch said, as if humoring a pupil. "Grief requires ceremony, or it grows teeth." She let her eyes kiss the beer. "The river would like to be allowed to forget this bank. The village would like to be allowed to forget this debt. I am here to show them how to put their hands together." "By renaming what feeds them," I said. "By reminding them that belonging is a covenant," she said. "Covenants need witnesses and a signature. I am both." "You are a collector," I said. "You put songs in bottles and sell the glass." She tilted her head. "I see Thane taught you metaphors as well as angles. Good. Then you will understand this one. A bridge that refuses traffic is just a pretty plank." Valen reached with his presence the way one lays a cloak over a chair. Unhurried, proprietary, patient. "State the ceremony," he said. "We will decide its lawfulness." "Of course." She clapped once. Musicians adjusted posture. 3 parts: calling, witness, and release. We call the name to the beer. The village attests to the debts that must be paid. The river is released from choosing this bank every spring. The wake concludes. Ilaran becomes something new, something less anchored. "Unmoored," I said. "Unburdened," she corrected. My father stood behind the crowd, hat in his hands, making his rough knuckles very clean by rubbing them with the other. I felt him like a splinter I had chosen not to pull. The old women glanced at me with the frankness of crones who have practiced disliking queens for a century. Children stared at Umbra, whose attention had narrowed to a thread smoking out of the musician's instruments. "Cade?" Valen said, not turning. The master of angles had come. Of course he had. He folded the air at my left shoulder as if it were linen, and sniffed the composition of the ceremony as a vintner sniffs autumn. "Waited for theft," he murmured, "but it will taste like mercy if you're not accustomed to wine." "Valk?" Valen did not look right. The forge keeper stood there anyway, a hammer somewhere that was not in his hand, and still made the snow unafraid. "Iron," Valk said, "hidden under the willow letters. Once the witness is spoken, the metal will bind the name, even if the river refuses to." "Rowan?" Valen's voice was a net cast toward a familiar shore. "The current sulks," Rowan said from the bridge itself. barefoot, trousers rolled to his calves. It doesn't like being choreographed, but it will dance if the violin hits the high E. Ira, Valen said. She was everywhere, which is to say, I could not see her. The air answered instead. Knots in the veils, 3 blades, 2 poison vials. The matriarch wears none of them. She wears time. And the warden? Valen said softly. The gates listen, the warden replied. They disapprove. The matriarch watched us take stock as one watches a chessboard decide it is a lake. She did not fidget. She allowed them their reports because she had her own. You brought an army, she observed, amused rather than intimidated. You invited one, Valen said. She offered a small bow for the compliment she had given herself. Shall we begin? She lifted her hand. The musicians set their bows. The mirrors on the priest's robe dimmed to smoke. A murmur ran through the villagers. They did not know what to do with their hats. Sometimes you need something to hold while sovereignty changes hands. Wait, I said, stepping forward. Every head turned, because that is what a village does. It turns as a single animal toward whatever has decided to be prey. My voice did not falter. It knew what it was being spent on. A wake requires a kin, I said. I am Ilaren's. A grandmother I knew by the name of her pies spat into the snow neatly. You are knights, she said. I am both, I said. And tonight I choose which of me speaks. The matriarch's mouth softened, which is what kindness looks like when it is sharpening something else. Let her stand, she said. Bridges insist. I went to the bier. Umbra came to my left. Valen stood a pace to my right, not touching. The ring hummed against the mark as if remembering its forge. I laid my palm on the willow letter E and felt the tremor of every winter fence that had leaned and still refused to fall. Calling, the matriarch intoned, and the musicians played a note that would make hearts kneel if they weren't busy. Speak who you are. I inhaled. The bond breathed with me. The basin in the hall of names was a ghost under my hand. The given, the earned, the true. Elara, I said, and the river listened to how my mother had said it. Tired, faithful, fierce. Elara of Elaren, I said, and the field straightened because a spine had been noticed. Elara, the night said inside my bones, hungry and proud. Threshold, I did not say that one. I let it burn behind my teeth so it would remember I had light of my own. The matriarch tipped her chin. Witness, she said. The priest stepped forward, mirrors inhaling. Debts? It was a list I knew before it was read. Floods, rot, harvests that had failed and still been counted as a favor from the king. Days the road did not return a father. Babies who did not forget to die. Debt eats languages the way fires eat furniture. Priest was good with numbers, which is not a prayer, and should be. When he finished, the wind did not move. The matriarch touched the willow letters, and the iron beneath them woke like a dragon, admitting it was a chain. Release, she said. The violin went for the high E. Rowan swore under his breath, and the current bristled. The iron wanted the name, the river wanted rest. The villagers wanted an end to being surprised by rivers. The matriarch wanted what she always wanted, decisions to dress themselves as inevitabilities. Valen, I said softly, not looking at him, not asking, using. The blade of his name turned in the lock I could not see. The bond steadied, not with force but with place. The night did not surge. It stood. There is a difference. The difference saves villages. Speak what you intend, he murmured back, not with words, with the heat that lives between syllables. I set my palm harder on the willow and let the ring bite skin until it tasted the vow. Ilarin, I said to the iron, to the river, to the villagers who had taught me dignity and bad jokes, you are not a coin to be melted and poured into another face. You are not a debt with legs. You are a mouth. You say the names of those who grow in you. You say no to floods and come home to sons who count roads for a living. The matriarch's gaze warmed as if watching a good pupil remember her sums. And what does a mouth do when it drowns? She asked softly. It spits, I said, and it learns to bite. I pressed, not rage. Tune, Cade's angle, Valk's iron, Rowan's sulk, Ira's blade hidden under the tablecloth, Marea's record of breath, the warden's disapproving gates, Saren's arithmetics of mercy, Thane's patient metronome, Valen's name balancing the scale that wanted to tip toward theft. The violin reached the high E and found it crowded. It skittered into a shriek. The chain under the letters arched, brightening, choosing, pleased, and hit the tuning I had set. Iron forgot itself for a heartbeat. The river remembered a summer when it had wanted to be a mirror for children and not a thief. It backed up like a dog called too sharply, and then sidled forward like a friend asked to sit. The matriarch's fingers tightened. A hairline crack ran down one thumbnail. She ignored it. Pretty, she said, but temporary. Mercy is a tide, it always leaves. I lifted my hand and put it to my mouth and bit the inside of my cheek until blood rose. Then let the bank learn to bleed, I said. I drew my thumb across the willow E and left a line of red. My blood touched iron. Iron leaned, the bond hissed, and then settled with a satisfied purr. Valen turned his head a fraction, not in reprimand, in assessment. Price, his eyes said. Witness, the priest whispered, unexpected reverence roughening the word. She offers a portion, not of the village, I said, clearer than pain, of me. I pressed my bleeding thumb to the second letter, to the third. A bridge pays toll. Remember me when the river wants an easy appetite. Take mine first. A murmur, low and old as gossip, moved through the crowd. The matriarch watched without blinking. Generous, she said, but generosity is a thin roof. What about next year? And the next? Will you leave a vein on every letter? Will you teach your sister to do the same and call it legacy? Lyra's name beat my skin like a second pulse. I thought of her doll tucked beneath her arm, of Umbra's quiet attendance, of Saren's vow that had not been a vow because it did not pretend indifference. No, I said, I will teach the river a counterfactual. Cade sucked in a breath like a man watching a chessboard decide it is a cathedral. Elara, let it see, I said, what it becomes if it loves us. The ring sang a thin, clean note. The mark burned not punishment, not command-making. I pressed a new angle into the air the way you press a pattern into dough, gently, deliberately, ready to accept that some edges will blur. For a heartbeat, the river saw its reflection as a story told by people who lived because of it, not despite it. It saw boys with wet cuffs and girls with dragonfly names. It saw old women scraping algae off stones and humming, because work is a spell when you do it together. It saw a mouth that spat at floods and bit hunters who forgot to be grateful and kissed babies on summer evenings. It saw itself as ours. Water flinched, then held. The iron under the willow letters groaned, unhappy at having lost the immediate victory of a bolt sliding home. The chain stayed, but not to choke, to remind. It sank, slow, like a promise set into a hearthstone where feet will warm it every winter. Silence. Then, trembling, From the back of the crowd a voice. "Ilarin," an old man said, and his mouth remembered his bride's name when it tried to say the villages, and the confusion made the word tender. "Ilarin," a boy said, because children like to shout what the air is already rehearsing. "Ilarin," said my father, who had learned how to pray by watching fences stand up in wind. The river raised and lowered its chest and decided, for one more season, to be gentle with its lungs. The matriarch looked bored. It was an achievement. "Applause," she suggested lightly, and her musicians were disciplined enough to keep their hands still. Very touching, the sort of solution that makes poets expensive. "Leave," Valen said. "Soon," she said. "First, payment." Valen smiled with the charity of a predator who has already eaten. "You brought a wake to a village that did not hire you. You tried to name a thing that had not died. You will pay us." She tilted her head. "With what?" "Time," he said. "You will not come within 3 quarts distance of this river for a year and a day. You will not send a hand or a whisper. You will not subcontract your appetite." The veiled procession rustled as if a breeze had found the correct page. The matriarch considered the arithmetic. "Excessive," she said, "but instructive." She made a small, precise motion. The mirrors on the priest's robe went blank, glass again, rather than hunger. The musicians set their bows down as if surrendering small weapons to a friend who would return them with interest. "Very well," she said. "For 1 year and 1 day, I will allow the night to consider itself clever here." "And in return?" Valen asked. A smile like a needle threaded her face. "You will attend my theater when I ask," she said. "You will bring your bridge. You will not teach her to avert her eyes when mercy wears a prettier dress than justice." Valen held her gaze, then nodded once. "Agreed," Khan said. I did not like that the agreement tasted of iron and a little of my blood. The bond told me the price could have been worse. It did not tell me what worse had almost been. The matriarch inclined her head to me. "No sarcasm. You invented a sweet lie and taught it to behave like truth," she said. "Dangerous talent. Keep it warm." "I told a truth that wasn't tired," I said. She laughed, brief, delighted. "Oh, bridge! Do not let him turn you into a crown. Crowns get sleepy. Bridges collapse precisely." She turned, her veils re-knitting the path in front of her. The procession folded into the trees like priest birds. The wake exhaled as if coming up from a deep pool. People began to remember they had fingers and hats and neighbors. My father reached me. He did not embrace me. He put his hand on the willow letters the way one places palm to a horse's neck. Trust, asking to be taken back. "Hungry?" he said, rough and ordinary. "Starved?" I said, and the word meant more than bread. Umbra shook snow from his fur and sneezed at the river. The river pretended it had not enjoyed the attention. Valen did not touch me. He did take a slow breath that I felt travel down the bond like a wall learning where its door has been installed. "Count," he said, soft, for my ear alone. "Price?" I asked, just as soft. "3," he said. "Your blood, my name, her invitation." "And the change?" I asked. "Everything," he said. He turned to the villagers and spoke not as a god and not as a lord and not as a hunger. He spoke as a contract. "For 1 year and a day, no court will tax this river. If any priest or poet attempts to soften this bank with pretty philosophy, you will call us. If any queen speaks in veils, you will make her say the names of your children." The pie grandmother put her chin up. "And if you forget us, Valen's mouth curved in grim appreciation. "The night doesn't forget," he said. "It collects." "That's not comfort," she said. "It's law," he returned. She spat again, more neatly than before. "Then I'll learn to like law. Bread is hard too, and we eat it." The crowd eddied and broke into smaller, kinder currents. Fires were persuaded to pretend they had been planned. Children were herded away from the iron they had memorized with their eyes. The priest shed his mirrors and became a tired man again. The bond loosened its belt. The dark that had come with the procession washed back into the trees like a tide that had realized the cliff was not ready to be taught. I turned to Valen. "Why did you accept her price?" "Because I don't intend to hide you," he said. "Because she would have taken a worse thing in the shadows if I didn't feed her in the light. Because you need to learn how to walk into another woman's theater and refuse to be scenery." "Will I?" I asked. "You already did," he said. My father cleared his throat. He held out a folded cloth. I unwrapped it. The pear knife my mother had used, its wooden handle worn smooth where her thumb had lived. The blade had been sharpened unevenly over years of making small fruits into sweetness. "Your mother said tools are truer than jewels," he said. She wasn't wrong much. I closed my fingers around the knife. It agreed to belong to me. A quiet moved through the birches, the private kind. Snow began to fall, soft as apology. Children squealed because snow is theater, and they had been deprived of adequate matinees. Umbra tried to catch a flake with his tongue and then pretended he had meant to taste the air. The matriarch's wake left no litter. Dusk is tidy when it wants to be invited again. We stood a few moments longer, counting Saren's ward arithmetic, Cade's angles, Thane's breathing. The river kept its chest steady. Then Valen inclined his head toward the trees. "Come," he said. "The palace wants to tell me whether to be proud or afraid." "Which are you?" I asked. "Yes," he said, and almost smiled. We returned through the between with the smell of willow and iron on our clothes. Behind us, Elarin kept saying its name under its breath, the way a child says mine to a toy it has been told to share. I did not blame it. The dark took us back without complaint. The palace exhaled. Doors blinked awake as we passed. Constellations rolled over in their sleep and pretended to be listening. Saren was waiting with Lyra awake on her lap, hair mussed, eyes sleep-sparkled. My sister saw me and grinned, gap-toothed from the apple I had not seen her lose. "You smell like snow," she said, "and like getting away with something." "Both," I said, and knelt. She pressed her forehead to mine. I felt her hum in her bones, not her throat. The song was quieter than it had been, not diminished. "Decided, did the river bite?" she asked. "It licked," I said. "Good river," she said, "magnanimous." Then, serious, "Don't let anyone steal me in a bottle." "I won't," I said. Valen stood in the doorway with his hands behind his back, the way men do when they want to touch a future and know they shouldn't. The bond hummed. He did not intrude on the sweetness, because he had learned that some mercies are taller than thrones. He cleared his throat finally, and the night remembered it was a court. "Rest," he said, "both of you." His gaze found mine and left a weight there. "Tomorrow, the archive will show you why the gates disapproved of your counterfactual. They are old, and they resent cleverness." "Let them," I said, reckless with relief. He glanced at Umbra, who had fallen asleep exactly in the doorway like a loyal inconvenience. "Move him," he said dryly. "He's a door now," I said. "Law." Valen's mouth betrayed him with a soft huff. "Sleep," he said again. and left. Saren tucked the blanket around Lyra and studied me over the child's head. "You invented a promise and made iron pretend it had thought of it first," she said. "I should be furious. Instead, I am relieved." "Relief is a dangerous luxury," I said. "It lets you count wrong," Buddy says. "Indar, then spend it quickly," she said, and kissed Lyra's hair as if borrowing permission from someone kinder than law. When the chamber quieted, I lay awake and allowed the day to climb my ribs rung by rung and hang there like a ladder I might need again in the dark. My thumb ached where I had traded blood for tune. I put it to my mouth and tasted iron and willow and a river learning a new story. Umbra snored, which is hilarious in anything that believes itself a shadow. Far below, where the palace's heart uses stone for drums, the gates murmured their disapproval like old judges arguing with a child who has discovered addition. Let them count me, and find their sums unfamiliar. I closed my eyes. In the place where sleep loiters and bargains, a voice brushed my ear, soft as a veil. "We will have our wake yet, Bridge. Choose your dead carefully." I didn't answer her. I listened to Lyra breathe, and somewhere in the night a crown of thorns trembled in its glass and imagined my throat, and I smiled without kindness and sharpened my no into a poem it would hate to hear. Tomorrow I would learn how gates punish wit. Tonight I held fast to a name that refused to drown. Chapter 8. The Gates That Counted Back. No one tells you that old doors dream. They dream of the hands that built them, of the grief those hands were trying to keep out or in, of the winters they endured, counting the teeth of the wind. The gates beneath the night court did not sleep, but they dreamed in the way glaciers do, slow, crushing, precise. Saren woke me before the bells could measure a hunger. She looked like a verdict wrapped in velvet. "The archive is ready," she said. "The warden as well." Umbra lifted his head from the threshold with a sound between a sigh and a growl. Lyra did not stir. The ward around her pulsed like frost catching a pale Sunday. My father was a carved figure on the bench near the door, eyes open, fingers linked so tightly I wondered if serenity could bruise. "You don't have to come," I told him. He answered as farmers answer weather. "If a thing counts my roof, it may count me with it." I wanted to tell him the gates counted souls and songs, oil and iron, memories and misrememberings. I wanted to say that roofs were safer than throats, but I had learned a new arithmetic. Warnings are a kindness the world rarely affords, and love is the version you choose to spend. We went together, Saren. My father, Umbra, and I down corridors that thinned into edges, where steps made no sound and the ceiling forgot to star. The air changed several times. Once it tasted like apple peels drying on a windowsill, once like a forge left hot through a blizzard, once like the inside of a promise. "The gates resent cleverness," Saren said as we walked. "They were made by men who had just exhausted all the cleverness they had. They were hammered out of despair and precision. They have little patience for invention that looks like hope." "Then they and I will get along poorly," I said. Saren managed half a smile. "They will admire your audacity while they price your bones." The hall opened without opening. Walls became absence. Absence became weight. A vast arch hunched before us, neither stone nor shadow, its surface rippling in and out of existence as though undecided whether matter was an insult. The warden stood there, taller than any threshold has the right to be, helm canted like a listening head. It smelled of rain on a battlefield and ash dampened enough to remember a flood. Bridge, it said, voice like two millstones turning a rumor into flour. You brought your father. He brought himself, I said. The warden's empty visor regarded the man who had taught me to set my jaw. You taught her to carry the weight she chooses, it observed. I tried, my father said. Try again, the warden advised, not unkindly, and turned its hollow face to me. The gates will measure you now. Saren's hand touched my shoulder. Just once, just enough to say count. Then she stepped back to stand with my father, not between him and danger, because she knew better than to insult either, but at his elbow, where good counsel lives. Umbra pressed his muzzle under my palm. The bond hummed a low, steady string. Valen was not here. He allowed the test without arriving to alter its scale. It felt like trust or a teaching or cruelty wearing discipline. The difference would be in how I survived. What must I do? I asked. Admit what you have done, the warden said, and suffer the difference between what you think it was and what it was. Truth, I said. Counting, it corrected. The arch flexed. A seam appeared at its center, thin as a hair at first, then widening until a slit of dark stood before me. It pulled at breath, and thought the way winter pulls at creek ice gently, as if it were above such things as pressure. I stepped forward. The dark did not swallow me. It added me the way a careful ledger adds a borrowed goat to a line that will decide whether a village eats. The world tilted, and I slid, not falling, not flying, along a plane cut into the underside of reality. Do not fight the angle, murmured a voice that might have been Cade's and might have been the part of me that had learned angles as prayer. Observe, pay, adjust. Light blossomed, not brightness. Clarity. A field rolled around me, not Alarans, not any mortals, but the field of decision. Stalks of something like wheat, like time, brushed my knees. Each head contained a moment, a choice I had made, a breath I had taken, a look I had returned or not. When the wind passed, the heads rippled, and I saw, in the way one sees constellations during a story, the pattern my life had drawn so far. The first sheaf I touched turned to water under my fingers. I was in the forest again. The night the moon bled, the mist rose and Lyra sang, and the High Lord's hand closed around my wrist. I swear, I said, and the bond burned a path through me like a road laid in one night by desperate men. The gate's voice, no longer the warden's, older, plural, severe, spoke. Debt, vowed without counsel, paid with blood not her own, collateralized with song not understood. That is not fair, I said. I had no time. We count. We do not forgive. I do not ask forgiveness. I ask context. A pause. Context is a tax on counting. Then tax me and tell it, I snapped, because anger had always been my cheapest currency, and sometimes you spend what you have to keep a boat afloat. The field shifted. The sheaf became a page. Thane's hand, steady, scarred, lay next to mine on the archive's lectern. The illustration of the crowned man bowed over, a chain shivered, and the ink ran, drawing a second figure beside him. A woman whose face was mine, and not wreathed, not in thorns, but in thread. The caption changed in a language I had not learned and understood anyway. She who threads. Alternate route available, the gate said. Not taken. Cost, potential knowledge deferred. I could not have known that path, I said, but softer. Tell me how to see it next time. Pay attention to small mistakes. They point to large doors. The page dissolved. The field returned. Another sheaf brushed my wrist and opened. The wake in Alarin unrolled like a scroll in snow. The matriarch's neat smile, the iron under the willow letters, the violin reaching for a star and finding my hand there first. Deviation detected, the gates announced. Counterfactual introduced into current. Hits, mercy, loyalty, invention. Misses, precedent, obedience, caution. Risk, medium-term starvation of courage. Long-term appetite for self-sacrifice without calculation. I flinched, as if it had struck me. Starvation of courage? And if you show them a river that might love, they may forget how to hate a flood. I did not tell them to forget hatred, I said. I told the water a story until it chose gentleness. Water does not choose, the gate said. It flows. You gave it a weight and called it a will. This is poetry. We are law, and yet you are wrong, I said, heat rising, pride and fear mating into certainty. It chose. A silence like snow falling on graves drifted through the field. Very well, the gates allowed. We will measure the choice as yours then, splitting the debt. 50 parts to you, 5 to your lord, the remainder distributed among the witnesses in proportion to their breath. That seems generous, I said cautiously. It is arithmetic. You spoke most, you pay most. And my blood? I asked, glancing at my thumb, which ached as if it remembered the iron by name. Accepted. It settled a small ledger you do not yet own. Do not mistake gesture for payment. Umbra pressed against my thigh or something like him, born of my need for him here. His fur curled around my fingers like drier smoke. He did not speak. He does not have words. He teaches with warmth. Keep counting, I said. The field bowed like a congregation and parted to reveal a path paved with long, flat stones. On each stone, a name was cut and recut until the edges were soft with use. Valens lay near the beginning. Not his given kings collect given names like coins and keep them for rainy days, but the earned one, Knight's Law. It was chipped in 2 places, as if he had used it to pry open doors not meant to welcome him. What did he pay? I asked without meaning to. More than you should know and less than he will admit, the gate said. His debt is larger than his name. This makes him useful and dangerous and lonely. The urge to touch the stone surprised me. I kept my hands at my sides. Another stone glimmered no name, only a groove where one would go. It waited the way a mouth waits for a word in a language it has not consented to learn. Mine, I said. Not yet, the gate said. You sang half a name yesterday. You will complete it or choke on it. I will not choke. Many do not intend to. We walked. If the slide of thought under old arithmetic can be called walking past histories. I could not read without bleeding, and futures I could not afford yet. The path ended before a slab of black iron as tall as a tower door. It had no hinge, no handle, only a circular scar where a hand had once pressed and been refused or welcomed depending on the world that day. Place your palm, the gates instructed. Will it bite? I asked. It will weigh. I set my hand to the scar. The iron was cold, the way river stones are cold after a moonless night. The ring hissed and then fell obediently quiet. The bond pulsed. Umbra's fur rose. Saren's lessons tucked themselves under my ribs. I let the night be present without letting it plead for me. The iron warmed. The weight arrived slow, relentless, intimate, not a crushing, a multiplication. It took each choice I had made and asked it to bring a friend. It took each breath and counted the ones I would not be allowed later. It took my love for Lyra and doubled it with my duty to strangers. It took my anger and made it a plow. My knees wanted the floor. I refused. If the gates preferred faces at their feet, they could ask prettier men. The first number came soft, austere, like a teacher placing a slate on a desk. Your debt. 9 and a bloom. 9 and a what? I said, through teeth clenched so they wouldn't chatter. A bloom is a debt that will ripen into more debt if ignored, the gate said. It is common in bridges and kings and mothers. 9 is not so bad, I said, because lies are scaffolding and sometimes you need to stand on something while you build truth. 9 at current valuations, the gate said. The market for vows is volatile. How do I pay? I asked. Work, restraint, mercy when law can withstand it, and law when mercy will coddle rot. Learning before bleeding, bleeding when learning would be theft. Specifics, I said, and the iron's warmth turned sharp, like a reprimand administered with affection. Do not accept theater invitations you are unwilling to ruin. Do not let the quiet queen teach you applause. Do not use the night to polish your reflection. Use it to see. A small laugh shook loose of me. You sound like Saren. Saren learned to sound like us, the gate said. She is a good student. She is also terribly lonely. Do not throw her a rope and call it a friend. The warmth peaked, then cooled. The iron released my hand. My palm bore no mark. I knew better than to look for one where eyes could find. Old law prefers its signatures on the inside of the skin. The field folded. The slit of dark reopened before me, the angle easing as if relieved to show me out. Is that all? I asked. You think we owe you spectacle, the gate said, not offended, merely noticing. We owe you a sum, the rest you owe yourself. Then give me one more thing, I said, because if audacity is a coin and you have it, spend it where it might draw blood. A pause. What? The name you call the quiet queen when you whisper to one another where she cannot hear. The dark tasted like iron filings and old laughter. We call her suture. The word snagged in my ear and refused to pass through. She makes wounds into doors. Then she invites the world to step through and calls it medicine. Thank you, I said, meaning it. The bloom will ripen faster now that you know a thing worth gambling against, the gate said, almost amused. Mind your garden. The slit widened. The field lifted me like a teacher setting a child back on a stool after showing her the trick behind the coin. I slid out. Breath returned. Gravity remembered to nag. The hall came back in a rush. The warden at attention. Saren coiled to a calm, my father's weathered face, stubborn through fear. Umbra thrusting his head into my hand, because bodies are wiser than old doors. Well? Saren asked. Counting, I said hoarsely. And gardening. And metaphors that want to stab you. Osos. My father's eyes searched my face for the outline of a child. He found a bridge instead and did not flinch. Do we owe a thing? Yes, I said. And yes, and always. Can it be paid? He asked. If we keep our receipts, I said, and he grunted, which in our dialect means good, hateful, necessary. The warden's helm tilted. You did not betray your breath. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Do not thank me, it said. Thank arithmetic. It is faithful when lovers forget. Saren's mouth twitched. And you, warden, will you still disapprove? I disapprove of cleverness that behaves as if it were law, the warden said, "but I approve of bridges that do not charge toll out of vanity." And my breath touched laughter and decided to wait. The bond pulsed a note from somewhere else, someone else, arriving not as command or inquiry, but as presence. Valen. He did not enter, not yet, but the night sighed in the walls as if the high windows had opened. A moment later, he appeared, not walking so much as manifesting in the way storms gather. By degrees, until you remember, they have been building all day. He took in the warden, my father, Saren, Umbra, me. The bond carried no question. He could count the answers on our faces. "Payment due?" he asked. "9 and a bloom," I said. He touched the edge of a smile. "Modest. The bloom will prefer drama," Saren said dryly. "Try to starve it." Valen's gaze slid to the arch. "Did they give you a name?" "Suture," I said, letting the word cut me a little as I said it, so it would not wait for a better moment. He inclined his head. "She will be pleased to know they still resent her." "You knew it already," I said. I wanted to hear how it sounded in your mouth. His attention softened, which is how he did affection, behind a lattice of discipline, guarded and unmistakable. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said, "but I feel tall and a little hollow." "The cost of having your spine measured," Saren murmured. Valen stepped closer. He did not touch me. He stood so that the bond hummed in a more comfortable key, a setting I could use to keep my voice from shaking when I tried to be brave in front of fathers. "Walk," he said. "The archive has more to show, but not today. We will let the sum settle." My father cleared his throat. "If I asked what you plan to do about the woman who sews wounds into doors?" Valen regarded him with the honest attention he saved for men with calluses. "I plan to complicate her angles until she is too tired to be clever," he said. "I plan to make her theater affordable only to those who would leave early." "And if she brings knives to my river?" my father asked. Valen's eyes went winter sky. "She will not." And my daughter believed a river could choose kindness, my father said. "I will let you believe this for now." "It is not belief," Valen said. "It is law and hunger, and the difference between them." We left the warden with its disapproval like a shawl, and climbed back through corridors that remembered stars. The palace felt pleased with me. It is not a kind sensation. Approval from old stone is like a teacher's chalk tapping the blackboard. You have aced a lesson and will be given a harder one for your trouble. On the landing above the mirror hall, Cade waited, leaning against a colonnade like a rumor that had decided to stay. He flicked a coin made of shadow and let it vanish between his fingers. "You've been measured," he said, grinning like a man at a racecourse. "Do they still add in base 10, or have they gone exotic since my last sin?" 9 and a bloom, I said. He whistled. "Oh, they fancy you." "Is that good?" I asked. "It means you're interesting." He cocked his head. "How is the bloom today?" "Hungry," I said. "And vain. Starve the vanity," he advised. "Feed the hunger only when the prey deserves ritual." Valen arched an eyebrow. "You're in a preaching mood." "I had a fine morning eavesdropping on dusk," Cade said, straightening. 2 couriers, 1 corridor, 3 hints, 1 almost stab. Suture plans to host her theater in the drowned orchard. He flashed teeth. "She prefers fruit that rots prettily." "The orchard," Valen said. "She risked sentiment." "She thinks sentiment is a leash for queens," Cade said. His glance slid to me. "She has not met a bridge who can make grief bite back." I was too tired for compliments. "What is the orchard?" Saren answered. "A field beyond the North Hall where trees grew 100 years, and then the ground forgot how to be ground. The roots drank more memory than water, and now the fruit falls into a pool that thinks it is a mirror. Lovely, I said, and dangerous, and very photogenic, Cade said. Bring your best no. And Valen's attention returned to me. He watched in the way men watch fires, with calculation and longing and respect for the way flames do not negotiate. You will rest, he said. I will read, I said, stubborn out of reflex, ridiculous out of love. You will sleep, he countered, and something in the bond leaned toward the command like a hound toward a whistle. He did not pull. He suggested. Fine, I said, and knew I was agreeing because he was right, not because I had become obedient. He looked absurdly satisfied. Back in my chamber, Lyra was awake and making a coronation out of breadcrumbs in the doll's hair. She looked up, saw the fatigue stitched between my ribs, and patted the bed with solemn pomp. Sleep now, she said. I will keep the gates. What do you know about gates? I asked, sinking down beside her, Umbra curling at our feet like a chapter closed before a better one opens. Enough, she said. Sage with 6 years. They like songs that don't rhyme. Rhymes make them sleepy. I'll write an irregular poem, I promised, and her laugh made the ward brighter. My father, Saturday. He took out a bit of twine and tied and untied it around his fingers until a cat's cradle became a net, became something like a ladder. 9 and a flower, he said, mangling the vocabulary with intent. I've seen worse debts. A bad harvest owes more. This one bites, I said. Then don't feed it sugar, he said. Give it chores. Valen stood at the threshold. He could enter any room in his palace, and he hesitated at mine. He held my mother's knife as if asking it a question before trusting it with an answer. He set it gently on my dresser, the wooden handle catching the light. Your mother's tools are truer than jewels, he said. Your father is not wrong much. For a flash short as a moth's life and hot as a forge breath, I saw him as the Gates had hinted, useful, dangerous, lonely, the shape of a man accustomed to saying, I will carry this because no one else is allowed, the shadow of a boy who had once wanted someone to say, you don't have to. Valen, I said. He looked at me, and the palace leaned in. Thank you, I said, for not arriving earlier, for letting me be counted without your shadow taming the sum. His mouth barely moved. You make me want to be proud, he said, and that is not a safe thing to be. I've always preferred dangerous cheers, I said, and Lyra snorted in agreement. He left, not because I had dismissed him, but because he understood that certain mercies must be performed off stage. Sleep smuggled itself into my bones. I do not remember when I succumbed. I dreamed of doors of the gates, counting backward through my days, until they found a morning when my mother had braided my hair and told me that some things you must love enough to lose, and some you must love enough to refuse. I woke to Umbra's soft alarm, and the smell of rain boiled in iron. Saren stood at the foot of the bed. Her eyes were darker than ink can achieve. She spoke in the voice of someone who had moved too fast to allow fear the courtesy of a scream. The orchard, she said. It's flooding. I was on my feet before the ward could decide whether to reinstate itself. Suture? Likely, Saren said. Or memory acting like obedience. The fruit is falling into the pool, and the pool, she swallowed, and it had to be bad to make her swallow and let me see it. The pool is reflecting what it should not. Lyra slipped from the blankets and put her small hand in mine. Her palm felt like a warm warning. Don't let the water see me, she said. I won't, I said. and meant it in all the ways it could be meant, and a few that would make the gates shake their heads. My father was already taking his hat down from the peg, his fingers sure even when nothing else in the world could be. Valen appeared without theater. He looked like a verdict that had decided to dance. "Ready?" he asked, and the bond thrummed like a bell rung underwater. "Count first," I said, and he smiled because I had finally learned to call that word before yes. We went to the orchard. Valen, Saren, Cade, the warden, a disapproval on legs, Umbra, a door with teeth, my father an oath with weather in his pockets, Lyra behind a ward that shimmered like frost on a brave morning. We went because the bloom had found water, and because Suture loves awake more than law loves sleep. The trees waited, tall and patient, their fruit small suns sliding off their branches to drown in a mirror that had decided to show only futures. The flood's voice was not loud, it was persuasive. "Suture has begun to stitch," Cade said, tasting the air. "She wants to sew a door from orchard to river. She intends to unmoor a bank with a pretty trick. Then we break her seam," Valen said. "And who chooses the needle?" Saren asked, gaze cutting to me. "I do," I said, because I was tired of being an accident and I had paid for the privilege. I drew my mother's knife. It was not a blade that believed in itself. It believed in pairs, in small tasks done well, in sweetness under skin, in a life that used tools until they had memories. I held it over the mirror pool. "Ellerin," I whispered, letting the name show me its teeth and its gums, its no and its come home. "This is mine. Hey." He willed to 8 The water trembled, remembering a river that had agreed to be gentle for a season. Valen spoke my name like a blade he was not quite willing to use. "Ilara." I pressed the knife into the water. It did not cut. It unsewed. Little stitches of reflection snapped, and the futures bled back into possibilities. The fruit rose and bobbed and laughed quietly because fruit wants to be eaten, not prophesied over. A hush fell that did not belong to weather, the kind that happens when a queen realizes her theater is missing a wall. From the far end of the orchard, veils stirred. Suture arrived without company, because company is a leash, and today she wanted her hands free. Her face was still the face of a woman you forget in a market until she speaks and the air puts itself in order for her voice. "Bridge," she said, and the word felt almost affectionate. "You spoil endings, endings that pretend to be beginnings," I said. "It's a taste I never acquired." She smiled. "You bled on iron, and now you believe you own a bank. Consider broader commas." "I considered them," I said. I declined. Valen stepped to my right. He did not crowd me. He offered presence like a wall you could lean against or ignore. The warden took a single step, which for it is an editorial. "Back away from my orchard," Valen said. "Your orchard?" Suture echoed. "How domesticated your hunger has become. It is almost charming." "Almost," Cade murmured. "You always do have the kindest insults." Suture's eyes, ordinary infuriating, flicked to Lyra, where the ward made frost dance around my sister's hair. For the first time, something like true interest warmed her face. "Ah," she said softly. "The hum." Umbra's growl made the fruit rattle in the branches. "Look at me," I said, moving to block her view, though the ward already did. "Not at what you want to bottle." She regarded me with a patience that made the orchard remember storms it had outlived. "Do you know why I began to sew doors out of wounds?" "And at me." "Because cuts are the only honest parts of kings," I said. "And gods love a shortcut." She laughed, bright and sincere, and I hated her more for it. "Because gates are lazy," she said. "They prefer sums to songs. They dislike accidents. They punish wit." I looked at a world that had become a ledger, and I wanted to borrow oranges without interest. "You wanted to cut out the tax collector's tongue," Valen said. "And then you wanted to collect the tax." Suture spread her hands. "One learns from professionals." "Leave?" Saren said. One word, sharpened. "Or we will count you." Suture's gaze slid back to Valen. "The wake was charming. The price was cheap. I will come back with a better play." "In a year and a day," he said. She inclined her head. "I enjoyed hearing you say it with your mouth, not your law." "I enjoyed making you accept it," he said. "Then we are both entertained," she said, and tipped her face to the trees. "Mind your bridges, Valen. They decide who gets to cross into your chest." She vanished not like smoke or shadow, but like a seam ripped open and then pinched closed. The orchard exhaled. The flood forgot its stage directions. The mirror became a pool again and decided to show a sky that had very little patience for theater. I stood very still with my mother's knife in my hand, and when the courage stopped starving and started eating again, I put the blade away and turned to my sister. She grinned. "You fixed the water," she said. "For now," I said. "Which is the only honest kind of fix." Valen looked at my hand. "You chose a poor weapon." "I chose a true one," I said. He accepted that, and I loved him a little for it, which is a debt I will have to pay later with interest. Saren came to my side and spoke without moving her mouth much. "The bloom," she said. "It ripened." "I felt it," I said. "We will prune," she said, and we was another debt I would pay gladly. The warden's helm tilted as if listening to a future unchoosing itself. "You are very tiresome," it told me. "Count me as entertainment," I said. "We do not enjoy ourselves," it said. "We disapprove." "Then disapprove louder," I said, and the helm made a sound suspiciously like a chuckle. Cade clapped his hands once. "Well, the orchard lives, the river resists, the queen retreats, and the bridge refuses toll. Breakfast? Bread and pears," my father said, and I heard in his voice a certain pleased, exhausted arrogance. "Tools, not jewels." And Valen glanced sideways at me, and I knew he was counting something I couldn't yet see. The inches between us, the weight of my no, the way the night itself leaned when I said mine to a thing that could drown me. "Come," he said at last, "let us feed the children and the old doors, and see what the gates will charge us for mercy today." We walked back through trees that had decided to remember how to be rooted. The fruit hung obediently, not because we threatened it, but because we had shown it a better story, and it wanted to be eaten by a mouth that could pronounce its name. Lyra danced ahead, keeping to the edges of the ward so it would sparkle for her like a skirt. Umbra herded her with the seriousness of a soldier, guarding a crown that thought it was a dandelion. At the edge of the orchard, I felt the bond thrumming a low, steady bell that did not intend to command me and did not intend to release me. Valen matched my stride. He did not smile. He wore the look of a man learning how to be proud without dying of it. "Bridge," he said. "Lord," I said. "Next," he said, and the word could have killed me if I had not made it into a promise. "Next," I agreed. Behind us, very far and very near, the gates counted backward and forward and sideways for the pure pleasure of arithmetic, and if there was a laugh hidden in their disapproval, I decided to let them have it. 9 and a bloom, a river that could be taught to love, a queen who sutured wounds into doors, a court that ate mirrors and learned mercy by accident, a knife that remembered pears. I tightened my hand on the tool that wasn't a weapon and followed the man who wore hunger like a law toward a palace that wanted me to hurry because there were chapters to write and a crown still humming in its box, imagining my throat. "Not yet," I told it, silently and sweet. "Count me later. I have work." Chapter 9. The crown that forgot its hunger. The palace liked to pretend it had only one morning, an agreement between bells and stone that spared everyone the indignity of noon. After the orchard, we returned to that morning as if we had not drowned in unsown futures an hour before. Kitchens exhaled bread and salt. The ceilings let their constellations hang low, a soft applause. The night, when it approves, puts away its teeth and shows you a velvet tongue. Lyra fell upon pears with the mood of a monarch taxing a market and forgiving half its debt for sport. Umbra stationed himself beneath the long table and permitted children he had never met to borrow his ear for confessions. My father stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands and watched me watch the court, and the look on his face could have been a benediction or a diagnosis. Valen did not sit. He leaned an elbow on the back of a chair as if to remind his body that to rest is not to resign. He watched Lyra count seeds into piles and listened to Cade whisper an angle into Valk's palm that made the forge keeper shake his head and laugh despite himself. Mireia wrote in the air with a quill made of someone's silence, and the words sank into the archive like flour into milk. "Sleep," Saren told me, not unkindly, as I reached for a crust I did not want but feared to refuse, "or your courage will start borrowing from your wit." "I only need an hour," I said. She tilted her head. "You need forgetting, the kind that returns as steadiness." Lyra wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and then remembered my mother and used a cloth. "I will count the gates," she announced. "If any try to sneak, I will make them stand in the corner." "Good," Saren said gravely, as if appointing a minister. My father stepped to my side with the old subtlety of a weather change. "You used your mother's knife," he said. "It unsews better than it cuts," I replied. He grunted. "She would have liked that." A pause, heavy as a sack of winter carrots. "She would have disliked your lord." "So do I," I said, and Valen's mouth across the room did a small, inexplicable thing that was not a smile and not one. "Sleep," Saren repeated, and the word threaded itself through my shoulders like a calm. I slept. For a long time or a little, I do not know. The palace is merciful with those who bleed, and the night counted my breaths like coins it meant to return. When I woke, the world was clean and dangerous, and for more. Thane came to find me. He appeared as if the hall had exhaled and decided to be shaped like a man. Umbra flicked an ear in greeting. Thane scratched the spot between it and Shadow with the practiced gratitude of soldiers who have learned to love animals more than kings. "Walk?" he asked. I tucked my mother's knife into my belt. "Let me guess. The archive wants me to read something it wishes it had written." "Close," he said, and the way his mouth moved told me he had slept worse than I had and preferred not to be pitied for it. "The archive wants to show you a story that refuses to keep its ending." We went down, not to the gates, to the cabinet with the crown. The glass coffin of the Evernight pulsed faintly, as if remembering grace. The crown lay within like a creature sleeping upright, thorns interwoven with filaments of star metal, sockets where jewels might have been if the night had believed in gems, a halo broken in 3 places and soldered with a substance that looked like dawn. "It's louder," I said. It has been throwing tantrums since you made the river behave without consulting it, Thane said dry. The crown enjoys being the only explanation in the room. I stepped closer. The crown did not reach for me, not with metal, with want. Its hunger tried to find my throat the way ivy finds brick, and underneath the hunger, something like, no, not kindness, something like function. A tool upset at being mislaid. You let it break the first time? I asked, noting the repairs nobody talked about. Thane's scars softened around the eyes. He did, he said, meaning Valen, on purpose. It thought it owned the night. He taught it republics. Who taught him? I asked. And I did not mean tutors or wars. Thane's jaw shifted a fraction. A woman who believed sleep is a luxury and love is a custom. She did not live long. She taught him anyway. Was she a bridge? She wanted to be a bridge, he said. She became a gate. She did not like being counted. Her name? He stared at the crown. She is better as a weather system, he said. We call her Noon. Why? I whispered. Because the night has no such hour, he said. He loved her for the way she reminded him of a sky he had been promised and denied. And did she love him? I asked, though I knew already. The ache in the walls when Valen forgets to guard his bones did not originate with me. She loved light, Thane said. He was an obstacle and an aperture. She wanted both. The crown hummed, offended at being ignored. I touched the glass with my knuckles. It thrummed like a hive that had been cheated out of its story. What does it want from me? I asked. Thane did not flinch. It wants to crown you, he said. It wants to be the hinge that closes on your name and turns it into law. It wants to belong to a throat again. It wants to be forgiven for the ways it behaves when obeyed. I do not forgive jewelry, I said. Good, he said. Footsteps, soft as rumor. Valen entered the library without forcing the air to applaud him. He looked like a confession hung on a hook. He stopped an arm's length away. We were a geometry the palace had begun to learn. My defiance, his restraint, Thane's unsentimental fidelity. It's restless, Valen said. So are you, Thane said. Valen's gaze cut to him. Do you remember when you took a tone with me like that last? The day you refused to let Noon die a queen, Thane said. I apologized later, I think. You did, Valen said. He looked back at me. You smell like pears. I smell like surviving breakfast, I said. Why are we here? To watch iron pout? To teach you what it tries, he said, nodding at the crown, and what you do when it succeeds. He lifted his hand and the glass sighed open, not mechanically, with relief, as if it had been granted its own pardon. The crown did not leap. It did not need to. It unhooked itself from the pillow of night silk and hung in the air as if remembering the head it expected. Valen stood very still, a man allowing a wasp to decide not to sting him. Will it pick me if I run? I asked. The crown does not chase, Valen said. It seduces. It will show you versions of yourself that you mistake for duty. It will offer you shortcuts through mercy. It will wear your mother's voice when it needs to. If it tries my mother's voice, I said, I will tell it to wash its hands. His mouth did that small, inexplicable thing again, and this time I decided what to call it. A nearly. The night's effort at humor, he gestured. Touch it. Brave? Thane muttered without moving. Call it necessary, Valen said. I extended my fingers. The crown lowered, not to my brow, but to my knuckles. Metal, cold as winter water, kissed the bones that remembered pears. It was not a bite. It was a question. Are you tired? The question said. Do you want to be less tired? Choose me. I will make love efficient. I recoiled. Not because the offer was obscene, because it was accurate. I was tired, and the crown's economy curled its slick argument through my ribs like steam seeking cracked mortar. No, I said, love is a waste on purpose. The crown hummed, insulted. It lifted, turned, considered me from the angle a hawk considers a field. How many mice? How many stoops? What will the wind allow? It made a sound like a lullaby, being tuned to a dirge. Again, Phelan said. I laid my palm flat under it. This time the crown did not ask. It showed. The mirror hall, aching with sharded stars. The wake, my blood bright on iron. The orchard, my knife undoing futures. Lyra's laugh, pear seeds like coins. My father's hat, and the way his hands tried not to pray for me. And then, the worst of kindnesses, Ilaran unafraid, my mother alive. Noon leaning in the doorway with sunlight stuck to her shoulders. Valen without his hunger, or with it tucked away like a boy's slingshot put into a drawer because today, perhaps, there will be no wolves. The crown pressed. I can ease you into this. I can make your sternum stop behaving like armor. I will take your burdens and return them as choreography. I will make you inevitable. I pulled my hand back, and the crown followed, only an inch. But I saw Thane's thumb twitch towards a blade he wasn't wearing, and I loved him a little for the motion. Enough, Valen said, not raising his voice. Command, like metal, behaves best when it believes itself unobserved. The crown paused. It did not bow. It rotated toward him, and the room became a hinge. He did not look away. You remember the day I broke you, he said, and the words were not boast. They were, we lived through this already. The crown vibrated, and the glass coffin, though open, shuddered as if it wanted to be a door again. I remember the day you refused to be easy, the vibration said without language. You loved a noon. You killed an hour. Valen's mouth remained still. He did not deny. He did not confess. He offered a truth the way a man offers a sword to a boy. Handle first, eyes steady. I will not be easy, he said. I will be lawful, and I will be hungry where law cannot reach. The crown turned back to me. It lowered again, and this time I did not lift my hand. I let it descend until cold metal shadowed my eyes, and the scent of starlight and old thunder filled my mouth. Elara, Valen said, and my name through his teeth was a blade laid flat against my throat, not to harm, to show me where I ended. I'm here, I said. I am not smaller than myself. The crown settled, not on my head, on my want. It pressed the place between my brows where headaches start and prayers end. It asked, quietly, the only honest question power knows how to ask, will you spend me, or will you let me spend you? I thought of the gates and their arithmetic, of 9 and a bloom. I thought of Suture and her invitation to rename wounds as doors, of dusk's mirrors, and the way the priest's robe had forgotten hunger when commanded to. I thought of Lyra's small hand, of Umbra's weight, of my father's refusal to be educated out of his dignity. I thought of Saren and her counting as ward against famine. I thought of Cade's angles, Valk's iron, Marea's ink, Rowan's tide, Ira's absence that made rooms honest. I thought of Valen, who had learned to say, I like a confession, and we like a weapon. I will spend you, I told the crown, poorly, at first, then better. I will waste you where waste is worship. I will deny you when your economy asks me to starve sweetness. I will tell you no and make you rhyme with it. I will not let you make love efficient." The crown tightened, not in anger, in skepticism. "You will break," it implied. "I break queens, I break bridges, I break hunger into ceremony and call it mercy." "Then beg," I said, and the audacity that had bought me my life found a new page to write on. "You want a head that does not embarrass you? You want a mouth that will not apologize for being costly? Beg me. Ask to be warned." Valen inhaled as if he had been struck. Thane did not move at all. In him, stillness was applause. The crown's thorns trembled. The star metal sang a chord so high the glass decided to pretend not to hear. For a heartbeat, I felt the thing consider the weight of asking. Power knows how to take. It does not often remember how to request. "Beg," I repeated, quieter. "Or go back in your box and hum about throats you will never touch." It bowed, only by the thickness of a breath, only because I had told it a truth it wanted to live inside, that a crown without a head is an instrument without a musician, and a musician without hunger is a disappointment. I lifted it with both hands. It was heavier than law and lighter than grief. I did not place it on my head. I set it on the pillow and turned away. "Good," Valen said. The bond steadied, as if it had been trying to match my pulse without my permission and now had been granted it properly. The room exhaled like a harp saved from fire. The crown did not protest. It hummed, low, like a dog learning a new word and deciding to obey it because it fits. Thane let his shoulders loosen half an inch. It is a large thing, that half inch, when the man has been holding up a door since dawn. "Now," he said, "the story that refuses to keep its ending." He led us deeper into the archive, past scrolls that smelled like nights the sea forgot to rest, past ledgers with numbers fat with famine, to a door made of paper and iron. When it opened, the room beyond was full of maps, not of land, of oaths, lines drawn between names, knots where promises had tried to pass through one another and had made a reef instead. One map lay under a weight shaped like a heart, a pattern of vows crossing and recrossing a set of circles labeled not with courts, but with seasons. "The Quiet Queen," Thane said, touching a cluster of lines that looked like veins. "Sucha." She began by sewing peasant pledges to royal ones. Then she extended the trick to gods and rivers. She aims now at the gates, wants to make wounds into doors, I murmured, wants to sow heaven into the earth and call it medicine, wants to bankrupt arithmetic, Valen said, and leave me as the sheriff who auctions virtue. "What is the ending that won't stick?" I asked. Thane looked at the map and then at me as if introducing two things that were about to dislike each other forever. "Every time we cut one of her seams," he said, "another appears at the edge of the cloth. The pattern shifts. She is not merely clever, she is adaptive." "Teach me the stitch," I said. "Then I'll teach the seam to come undone in its sleep." Valen's gaze warmed, which, in him, is the whole argument for winter. "You will learn," he said, "but not alone." "I'm not alone," I said automatically, because even women who know they are not alone must sometimes say it out loud so their bones learn the grammar. "No," he agreed and took a step closer. The bond tightened, not a leash, a rope tossed toward a friend already in the boat. I could feel him choose not to touch me. It was almost worse than being claimed. It was a kindness tuned to a key my ribs had not learned yet. "Tell me," I said, Because if fear is a tool, so is wanting. He did not ask, tell you what. He knew why I refused the crown. Because it loved me. Because it asked me to be easy. Because it told me that if I wore it, the night would require less of the world. And I am not a priest. And noon? I asked, before the nearly smile could occur again, before we returned to safety. He looked at the map until looking at paper was an insult to what his eyes can do. She wanted to stand where you stood today and give Mercy a choreography it could live with, he said. She wanted to be innocent without being ignorant. She wanted me to stop being a storm unless she asked for rain. His mouth finally did the thing, and this time it broke. She did not want to count. And you prefer arithmetic, I said. I prefer to keep the roof up, he said. I reached out before my good sense could polish the motion into a more elegant error. I set my hand flat against his chest, above a heartbeat that had learned discipline as religion. Then don't be easy, I said. Be impossible. It's a better story. For a heartbeat, his breath did not move. Then the bond sang a low, clean note, and everything in the archive leaned as if a new line had been added to a map, and all the old knots were consulting one another about whether to untie. He did not kiss me. He did something worse. He lowered his head until his mouth stood next to my ear, and he said, very quietly, Elara, it should mean nothing. It means the world. In his mouth, my given name was a law that had decided to carry me instead of leashing me. My knees remembered gates and declined to reenact them. Thane coughed. It was not gallantry, it was warning. The sound was wrong. The archive's air thickened. Shelves hummed more distressed than pleased. The constellations above us, etched in the ceiling as a joke the night keeps on itself, flickered, then vanished. Lyra, I breathed. Valen's hand found mine without permission. The bond did what it was made for, carried speed faster than fear. The corridor bent around us to shorten itself. The stairs were replaced by a ramp. The ramp was replaced by a thought. The thought was replaced by a door we did not remember making. Saren stood in the threshold of my chambers like a verdict handed down by a god who wishes to be liked but knows he won't be. Umbra was a line of shadow and teeth across the floor. My father had his hat on, which meant war. The ward around the bed burned not white, not blue, a color gates use when they disapprove. Lyra sat upright, hands folded around her doll as if to keep from ringing the room. Her eyes were bright with fever or joy or prophecy. She smiled when she saw me and then frowned as if the smile were an old dress she had outgrown. What do you see? I asked, dropping to my knees because kneeling before a child is not worship, it is accuracy. She pressed our foreheads together, and the ward let the gesture through because love is a passphrase the night pretends not to know. A crown, she whispered, asking to be a song. We told it no, I said, and the crown, far below in its case, hummed like a guilty dog. Not that one, she said, as if discussing a pear that had not been peeled properly. Another, a little crown, the kind you wear on a promise finger. She looked past me toward the ceiling, toward the old doors that count, toward the orchard that remembers how to drown without permission. It's falling. What is falling? Valen asked. Tomorrow, Lyra said matter-of-factly. But don't worry, we can sew a better one. The bond trembled. Valen held my gaze, and in his eyes I saw the gates stack numbers like towers, and suture thread needles with days, and the crown practicing how to bow without breaking its neck. Count, Saren breathed. Count, Thane agreed. hand on the door frame as if bracing the whole palace with the scar on his palm. "Count," my father said, and his voice made roofs straighten. I took Lyra's hands, the small, fierce tools of a girl who hums the world into remembering itself, and I did as I was told. I counted names. I counted debts. I counted kisses that had not happened, and the knives they would have to owe. 9 and a bloom, a crown that learned, a queen whose sutures, a river that might love us back. "Next," Valen said softly. I nodded. "Next," I said, and the night, pleased and afraid in equal measure, laid out a corridor we had not earned yet and waited to see if we would be expensive enough to walk it. Chapter 10. The tomorrow we sow. Tomorrow fell crooked, not from the sky, skies are too proud to fall, but from the bone-quiet place between promises. It slipped its stitch and came down like a loose star, wobbling, leaving threads of bright across the palace corridors. Children would have called them spider silk. Cade called them angles. The warden called them errors in a voice like wheat ground to its knees. Lyra did not weep. She watched tomorrow land on the edge of her bed like a nervous bird and tilted her head. "You're not ready," she informed it sternly, "and you don't get to be mean because of it." Saren stood at my shoulder, the ward's light combing the room into a pattern a heart could keep. Thane occupied the doorway like an oath. My father had his hat in his hands, which meant he was praying to weather. Umbra lay along the threshold, a door with breath. Valen came last, not because he was late, because the night waits for him to speak so it can choose a temperature. He crossed to the bed and did not touch tomorrow. He looked at it the way one regards an animal caught in a fence, with impatience and the tenderness men hate being seen doing. "What is it?" he asked Lyra. "A crown," she said, wrinkling her nose. "The little kind, the sort you put on a promise finger to say later without lying." Valen's gaze slid to me as if I were the surface all names reflect in. "Suture." "Of course," Cade said from the empty air, which is to say from just behind my ear. "She's stitching a calendar. If she can pin the morrow to a vow, she can unmoor a season and make the gates learn her algebra." "The orchard," Saren said, "simply because it was always the orchard when fruit wanted to rot prettily." "Not enough," Thane said, the scar on his palm tightening. "She needs a second seam, something with breath." "Ilarin," my father guessed, because he understands rivers in the way they like to be asked twice. "Or me," I said, "because bridges are invitations wearing ribs." Lyra patted tomorrow's head. It made a sound like a kettle unlearning how to whistle. "It wants to be useful," she announced, "but it keeps pretending it's brave when it's just surprised." Valen lifted his hand, not to hush her, to collect the air and pour it into a shape we could use. "Listen," he said. We did. The palace exhaled through stone lungs. Far below, the crown hummed a penitential chord, as if practicing humility. The gates counted backward and forward at once, frowning. The orchard whispered in wet syllables, and from the direction of the drowned orchard's mirror pool came the faintest sound, the click of a needle asking to be thread. "Suture is already there," Saren breathed. "She moves fast when her plays are interrupted," Cade said. "She's either showing off or running out of thread." "Both," Valen said, "because queens are capable of 2 hungers at once, and he does not flatter." "What do we do?" I asked, and the question did not tremble. The night had taught it not to. "Count," Saren said. "Then ruin," Thane added, ghost of a smile. "And so," Lyra decided. "Better," Valen looked at me. Bridge, Lord, I answered. Will you carry a crown that won't touch you, he asked, and refuse a crown that will? It was a riddle and a courtship and a contract. Yes, I said, if the first keeps my sister breathing, and the second tries to make love affordable. He nodded once. Pride is dangerous in him. He let himself feel a little. The bond hummed, a note that steadied knives. We went, but edge on, who down, rode on, and the orchard had remembered to be a forest and then forgot again. Fruit fell into the mirror pool and did not splash. It took the shape of futures. The water ran without moving. The trees bent toward their reflections like old people whispering to portrait painters. Suture stood on the far bank of the pool with her hands empty and her mouth full of the word inevitable. She wore no veils. She did not need them here. Tomorrow perched on her shoulder like a forgiven sin. She smiled when we came, and the orchard winced because it had seen that smile ruin marriages and make saints schedule their griefs. Valen, she said. Bridge, child, dog, wolf, Umbra said with the entire length of his spine. Gates, the warden intoned, and if steel can sneer, it did. Suture's eyes, a color one forgets remembering, lingered on Lyra, whose ward wrapped her like a frost that had decided to be kind. Your hum is heavier today, she observed. Yours is thinner, Lyra replied, with the rudeness children owe queens. Suture laughed, delighted. She is excellent. Keep her. Get to your point, Valen said, as if polite. It wasn't. The point is that law is a habit, Suture said. Habits can be replaced. I intend to sow tomorrow to mercy and make famine obey manners. You, of all men, should praise a woman who wants to refine hunger. You don't refine it, I said. You upholster it. And I know. Semantics, she purred. Look, she flicked her fingers and the mirror opened, not down out. A sheet of water turned to air, turned to cloth, stretched between two birches. On it, pictures moved, not visions, rehearsals. A Laren in spring, waist deep in grain. A Laren in winter, carrying hunger like tradition and choosing not to call it crime. The river wearing garlands, children fat on pears that did not rot in mirrors, the old men counting a harvest that made their backs forget to complain for one afternoon. Tomorrow, Suture said, as if introducing a lover one intends to marry because he has good shoes. For a price we can all afford. The air tasted sweet, sweet like stolen fruit. My mouth filled with it until I almost forgot iron and the correct way to cut pears. I looked at Valen. He was stone and ocean and the merciless arithmetic of roofs. He looked back at me with winter in his gaze and something softer like a wick that had been lit by accident. Price? I asked. Suture's face softened the way knives do when you pretend they are spoons. We bind the village's name to a crown, she said, not yours. A small one, a promise ring, as the girl says. They will wear tomorrow, and tomorrow will wear them. If they break it, they pay later. If they keep it, they deserve a mercy trained to heal. And who holds the leash? Valen asked. Not I, she said cheerfully. The leash will be tied to the mirror. The mirror will be fixed to the river. The river will be grateful. You forget iron, Valk said from behind us, voice like a forge embarrassed at its own tenderness. And you forget men. Rivers will always learn gratitude faster than men. Suture's gaze cooled. I forget nothing. I refuse. I am tired of watching arithmetic turn kindness into drought. And I am tired, I said, stepping forward, of watching theater turn theft into poems. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the distance I had closed. She enjoyed it. You invented a sweet lie and made iron pretend it had thought of it first, she said. You are my favorite mistake this century. Then write me into your errata, I said. We are unsewing the seam. Try, she invited, and the mirror bloomed with more laters than a lover can keep. Umbra's growl laid a low road for my feet. Thane's lessons climbed my ribs like a ladder. Cade's angles threaded my blood. Saren's arithmetic weighted my tongue. The warden's disapproval gave me a taste for refusal. Valen's name balanced the scale. I drew my mother's knife. Do you ever tire of pears? Sucha asked, amused. I am faithful, I said, and put the blade to the cloth. It did not cut at once. It asked a question first. Who pays for this rip? The bond lifted its head, a hound scenting law. I pressed. Not with rage, with tune. Count me, I said, and the gates listened furious and attentive as judges ought to be. The cloth tore without tearing. Threads unlearned their inventions. Tomorrow wobbled on Suture's shoulder and remembered it was a bird with weak wings. The mirror fluttered. The river underneath it lifted. Curious, then offended. Suture sighed. Always with the honesty. Always, I said. It's cheaper in the long run. She flicked 2 fingers. Thread snapped back into obedience. My cut healed. But it healed into a knot. We looked at it, and we all understood. She had wanted the knot. Knots make doors refund themselves. Clever, Cade said, teeth showing like knives too honest to hide. She's compounding interest. You admire me, Suture observed, pleased. I admire the angle, he said. I resent the hunger. Valen stepped to my shoulder. He did not touch me. He let the bond lay itself along my spine. Speak it, he said. My true name? I asked. He shook his head. You're given, but the way the river will remember it when it decides you belong to its winter. I swallowed the sweetness and said it like a law that had ceased to apologize. Ilara, the knot flinched. Again, Valen said, voice lower. Ilara, I said to the cloth, to the mirror, to the thread that thought itself a king. I am Ilara. I am of Elarin. I am not a leash. I am not a throat you can borrow. I am the mouth that says mine and no and come home. The knot loosened. Not much. Enough. Suture watched with unoffended interest. Oh, keep her, she told Valen, for the purely aesthetic pleasure of a problem you cannot domesticate. You mistake me for a farmer, he said. I am weather. Then storm, she said lightly. But know that there are roofs that like the sound. He did not look at me. He did not need to. The bond made of restraint and ruin braided between us. Lyra, Saren murmured. My sister had moved to the edge of the ward. It allowed her small hands through and no more. She cupped them to her mouth and sang no, breathed a scrap of a lullaby my mother used to hum when very tired bread finally rose. Tomorrow the bird cooed, uncertain. Here, Lyra said kindly, let us give you some place honest to perch. She breathed again. Not a note, an invitation. The bird hopped from Suture's shoulder and onto Lyra's brave, warded palm. The ward did not burn it. It recognized necessity when it arrived in feathers. Suture's mouth tightened the smallest amount. Clever child, it meant her. It saved in both sieve, who else? Child, the warden echoed, and in that grinding voice the word meant, account the way a hand means work. I used the wobble. I pressed my mother's knife to the seam again and whispered to cloth the way you whisper to frightened horses. "You are not a door," I said softly. "You are a wound. It is not weakness to heal. It is an answer." The seam sighed and forgot Suture's fingers. She let it. She had 2 more already threaded, hidden like a smile. "You can't keep this up," she informed us cheerfully. "You'll bleed out or fall in love, and either way, I win." "Fall in love with what?" I asked. "Your theater." "With a crown that makes hunger fluent," she said. "With a man who refuses to be easy. With the way the world looks when you're on the right side of a ledger." The orchard listened, bewildered and delighted, as if it had wandered into a conversation that was really a funeral and a wedding, trying not to share a calendar. Valen's voice entered my bones the way a river enters its bed. "Ask it," he murmured so soft only the bond could carry the suggestion. "Ask the crown to beg for the right to weigh this choice, then deny it, then use its hunger like a hammer." My mouth went dry. "Here?" "Yes." I shut my eyes and remembered the metal's cold question at my brow, the thorns that had trembled when asked to request. I opened them and looked at the air above the mirror, as if it were the pillow in which an arrogance had learned humility. "If you want me," I said clearly, to the crown in its glass far below, to the court, to the night that had put me on this road, to the girl who had once eaten summer by the river and thought love was just a word for staying. "Beg, ask to weigh my city's name, ask to lay your hunger under my knife." Silence startled the trees. Even the mirrors stopped pretending to be well-bred. Far below, something heavy and old went very still. Then I felt it a pressure like a knee on a kneeler that had not been used since the first sundering. The crown bowed. "Only a breath." "Enough?" it asked, not with words, with weight, with the awful politeness of a thing that could break you and would rather be a tool. "Denied?" I said gently, and the mercy of it hurt. "You may hum in your box. I will sing." Suture's eyes brightened the way a gambler's do when the table decides to catch fire. "Oh, you are ruin," she breathed, thrilled. "It looks so good on you." "Unsue," Valen said. "Now," Saren added, crisp as cold. "We did it together, the work, not the hunger. My knife found the seam and made tomorrow stop pretending it was a leash." Cade leaned pressure into the angle so the cloth remembered gravity. Valk spoke iron to it until it understood the difference between bond and chain. Maria wrote my refusal so the archive would learn how to pronounce it. Rowan growled at the water until it decided drowning was bad manners. Ira appeared only to remove a hand that reached where it had no permission. The warden disapproved at a volume that made arithmetic blush and behave. Thane kept count the way men keep vigil. Lyra held tomorrow, small and shaking, and taught it not to be cruel when it was frightened. Suture watched. She could have tugged, she could have knotted, she could have made the mirror a lake and asked it to drink us. She chose not to. "Why?" I asked, breath ragged. "Because you are making something better than theater," she said. "You're making a custom. Customs ruin queens more slowly. It's erotic." Her smile turned thin. "And because I prefer you expensive, Bridge. If you stay costly, Valen will not be able to wear you like a medal." "I don't wear medals," he said. "No," she agreed, patient and awful. "You wear doors." The final stitch let go with a sound like a sob deciding to laugh. The cloth fell into the pool and remembered how to be water. The pictures went out, as if the sky had blown upon too many candles at once and gotten its wish. The bird tomorrow trembled on Lyra's palm. She lifted it and set it gently on the branch of a pear tree that had grown scandalously honest since we got to know it. "There," she said, "stay where you belong. We will visit." Tomorrow puffed itself, indignantly cute. It stayed. Suture exhaled, and all the orchard leaned forward to borrow the technique. "One knot," she said. "In a garden I have been mending for a century." "Unmending," I corrected. "You sew doors into wounds. I make wounds into answers. We will be impolite to one another for a while." She looked at Valen. "You could make this easier." He looked at me. "I won't." She shivered, not from cold, from the small, private pleasure of a good loss. "Very well," she said, "1 year and 1 day. Perhaps 2. I am not generous. I am entertained." She turned to go and paused, not grandly, not with malice, with the distracted sadness of a woman who has misplaced a useful knife. "Noon would have liked her," she said to Valen without looking back. "She would have tried to keep her," he said, and the word keep was a prayer refusing to be a promise. "And failed," Suture said, smiling. "Bridges are not pets." She vanished along the seam between now and later. The orchard exhaled, wind choosing leaves it had been meaning to visit. I stood with my knife in my name and a small, indecorous joy under my ribs. Valen didn't touch me. He stepped to my side and let the bond lay warm along my spine until my breathing learned its own height again. "9 in a bloom?" I asked Saren without turning. "8, she said, almost smiling. "And the bloom pruned." "Count again tomorrow," Thane advised, but his voice had lost a stitch of its iron. My father put his hat on his head and tilted the brim, so the trees could not accuse him of crying. "Let's go home," he said, meaning the palace for now, and Alaran when the roads remember their manners. Lyra tugged my sleeve and I bent. She put her mouth to my ear as if the orchard might charge a toll for secrets. "I will marry the river," she declared softly, "but not until it learns to listen. That is my custom." "I approve," I said gravely, and Umbra thumped his tail at the wisdom of it. We walked out beneath trees, content to be trees. The pool behaved. The mirrors dreamed of useful reflections, faces washed after long work, hands mixing flour, a wolf pretending not to beg under a table, a man and a woman and a child counting gates and doors and debts like beads until the prayer became the life. At the palace threshold, the crown hummed in its glass, a small, chastened sound. It had bowed. It had been denied. It had remembered that power is not love, and love is not law, and hunger is not a right. It would hum again. I had no intention of never wearing it. I intended to make it beg the correct amount every time. In my chamber, Lyra fell asleep mid-sentence. Tomorrow nested above her on the window latch like a repentance. My father took his bench and turned it into a duty. Saren warded and then pretended not to watch me because she knows that some women confuse mercy for surveillance, and she would not do that to me even by accident. Valen stood at the threshold like a sin I had filed under later and now found myself revisiting because the roof held, the doors disapproved properly, and the river had agreed to be gentle for a season. "Come in," I said. He did. He did not command the room to bare its throat. He let it keep its secrets. He stopped an arm's length away, because that is how a man says, "I can devour you, and I refuse." He was, in that, the opposite of a crown. "Thank you," he said softly, and I knew he meant for the big denial, for the seam unsewn, for the way I had said Ilara like possession and law. "Don't be easy," I said. "Be impossible," he returned. "I am," I said, and the word carried more weight than my bone. He reached slowly until his fingers brushed the inside of my wrist, where the mark burned when I lay and warmed when I stood. It warmed. The bond did not tug. It laid itself under his touch the way rivers lie under bridges and are not diminished by it. "If I kiss you," he said, voice thinner than command, "will you call the gates and ask them to count us?" "No," I said. "I will call the river and ask it to listen." He bent. It was not a victory. It was not a promise. It was a custom begun. The press and retreat, the breath shared like pears in famine, the knowledge that tomorrow falls and is resown and falls again, and we will make a life of refusing to be cheap. When we parted, his mouth looked less like law. Mine tasted like a word I had not learned as a child because we did not have the linen for it. "We have work," he said. "We do," I agreed. He glanced toward the window where tomorrow slept. "And a calendar to bully gently," I said. His mouth did the almost smile. "Like you bullied a crown." "Precisely," I said, and my bones liked the plan. We did not sleep. We sat with the map of oaths and the knife that unsues and the ring that catches void and the wolf that keeps doors. Saren counted in the corner and pretended to nap. Thane snored standing up and lied about it later. Maria wrote what we had not yet said, and the ink agreed to wait. Cade flipped his coin and let it vanish. Rowan whispered to Cisterns. Valk hammered a thought until it learned how to stay. The night watched us and kept its teeth to itself. The gates disapproved in a key I have come to call affection. The crown hummed a song it had not known it remembered. Not coronation, companionship. Dawn did not come. Morning, which is to say mercy with a chore list, did. I went to the window and touched the small crown on the latch. Tomorrow ruffled, offended, and adorable, then settled under my finger like a promise that had learned modesty. "Good," I told it. "Stay." It would not. Not always. That is not what morrows do. But it would try, because we had asked with law and hunger and love, and had been expensive enough to mean it. Behind me, Valen spoke my name the way men do when they have decided to be proud and are afraid of it and choose to live anyway. "Elara." "Valen," I answered, and we began. The world did not grow kinder. We did.